IVM.
– 2019 was an exciting year in entertainment, with great highs and low lows. It was also the year that content went more political than ever before, with a variety of surfaces and platforms servicing consumer demand for more and better entertainment. So in the first episode of the new year, I sit down with my friend and founder of A Little Anarky and Bedlam, Koval Bhatia, and Namaah Kumar, AVP Design and Communications at Qyuki, and my wife, to deep dive into the best and worst that 2019 had to offer. Tune in for a critical look at the biggest releases in 2019 on Storytellers and Storysellers right after these messages.
घड़ी की टिक टिक के बीच अब वक्त हो चुका है टपरी पे मिलने का, चाय या कॉफी के साथ टपरी टेल्स सुनने का। सोचिए, अगर आपकी मम्मी, अक्का, दादी, नानी, जीजी, आजी भी आपके साथ इस चाय की टपरी पे एक चुस्की लेने आ जाए तो कैसी बातें होंगी? उनकी कहानियाँ कितनी नई या पुरानी होगी? एक्चुअली ना, टपरी पे पहली बार ये उनकी जुबानी होगी। तो मिलिए इन नए किरदारों से हर गुरुवार टपरी टेल्स पर। चाय की प्याली, एक नई कहानी with Madhuri Advani on IVM Podcast app, website or wherever you get your podcast from.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first episode of Storytellers and Storysellers in 2020. 2019 was a great year for Indian entertainment as well as the entertainment ecosystem around the world. The streaming wars, bidding for sports rights, creating new streams of content like non-fiction, reality and documentary took center stage as an industry matured with the advent of the internet. To talk more about the good, the bad and the ugly of Indian entertainment in 2019, I'm joined by two self-proclaimed content enthusiasts today to discuss the good, the bad and the ugly of the year in entertainment. We're joined by Koval Bhatia, who is the founder at A Little Anarky, a unique production house based out of Delhi and now Goa, that creates some very interesting pieces of content. If you've seen stuff like What Women Buy at Sarojini Nagar and that secret Coldplay gig video, that all of that was Koval. We're also joined by Namaah Kumar. Namaah is the AVP Design and Communications at Qyuki, and she's also my wife. Namaah has worked at Hotstar. She's now at Qyuki, works very closely with creators. And she's also run her own production house, the Vimnasium, a few years ago. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Hi, Vineet.
Hi, Koval. Hi, Namaah.
Hi, Vineet.
How's 2020 treating you so far?
Well, I've only been awake for one entire day, so...
Yeah, tell me about it. It's great to have you guys here. I've been meaning to have the two of you on for a while, and it's fortuitous that we're doing it for this one. I couldn't think of two better people to come in and talk about content in 2019. So, two people who can bring the range of perspectives that you guys can, both from a creative, a technical, a socio-political perspective. So let me bring you guys into this with a quick round of introduction from the horse's mouth. Koval, tell us about your journey so far and what 2019 has been like for you.
Right. So I've been running A Little Anarky for about a decade now. It's going to be a decade end of this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I think apart from A Little Anarky, as you know, I also started something called Bedlam a few years ago, which works in event, community, comedy, art, theatre workshop, all of that. So this is the year I moved to Goa to start working remotely because, well, frankly, I was sick of Delhi's air and I didn't want to pay Bombay's rent. So
and you landed a great deal in Goa.
Yeah, it's got great rents and great air. So yeah, and
great yachts.
I haven't looked into that yet.
Have you not? Because we've heard other stories.
They're not for sale yet. Sorry. So yeah, and I also learned how to sort of work remotely. I'm still dealing with it. In some ways, I have to split my time between Delhi, Bombay and Goa, but it's not been so bad. And I get to watch a great sunset every evening, and that's always a great thing to do.
And that's what life's about.
Yep.
And that's what life's about. So tell us how it's been for Anarky. I mean, you've been around for a decade. I know you right out of Jamia.
I mean,
when you started?
I started it right after college, after my master's from Jamia. And I didn't really, I mean, I was very keen on working in Delhi, but I didn't really find a place that I felt like working at. So I decided to start my own. And also because there weren't any really like women-run production or creative agencies at the time there. None that I felt were places that I would want to work at. So that was basically the thought behind it. And I didn't really intend to start a production house or an agency. It just sort of happened because initially I was freelancing, but then I hired people. Then work happened and it just sort of snowballed into an actual company within a year or so. So that's how it was. We've had quite the journey in the sense that I had the whole gig as a proper production studio for a while where we were doing corporates and brand videos and digital content. We were servicing television networks. I had a team of about 35 people. And then somewhere, I think it has something to do with me turning 30. I decided to kind of up the value of the projects I was doing and downsize the team that I was hiring. I think that's a fairly natural journey for a lot of companies like ours. And that's what I did. And then I also realized that with, the socio-political climate of the world, I do want to work more on social impact. And I do want to sort of work in the non-fiction space more and tell stories that I'm more interested in rather than what my clients are. And 2019 is the year where it's interesting because we're going to be launching this vertical in another week or so. It's we're basically rebranding a huge part of our work as Anarky Impact because that's the stuff we've been doing. I'm currently in the middle of shooting this short series for BBC. So there's been a lot of work we've been doing in the non-fiction social impact space, and I think that's where I want to keep pursuing my career in terms of documentaries, non-fiction, feature-length documentaries, and general sort of unscripted non-fiction.
That's wonderful. I think it's very important for creators who have a voice to find it and kind of put it out there in a meaningful manner that creates impact. I think purpose is a big buzzword 2019, 2020. But we'll come back to talk about that. Before I hop on to Namaah's introduction, why is it called A Little Anarchy again?
You've seen the tattoo.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course.
No, but I don't think my listeners can see the tattoos.
Okay, I have a tattoo on the nape of my neck. Because when I was really young, like years ago, there was this movie called The Dark Knight. I don't know if you remember.
No idea. What?
Anyway, the Joker was one of my favorite characters ever made. Not this Joker. I know we're supposed to get into this later, but not the Joaquin Phoenix Joker. The Heath Ledger Joker. Mm-hmm. The Heath Ledger Joker, yeah.
The late Heath Ledger. Oscar winner, late
okay,
Heath
fine,
Ledger.
whatever.
Oscar winner, football world champion.
Okay, it's more about the character and RIP Heath Ledger, but I don't care. It's about the character. No, I was really sort of impressionable and I saw that movie and I was like, मेरे को ये बनना है. And so I drew up a whole list of names from the movie. And at some point, people pointed out that Why So Serious is too commonplace. My father pointed out that a young woman going up to VP marketing of brands saying, I'm tonight's entertainment, ladies and gentlemen, I'm tonight's entertainment is not a good fit. So that left my third option, which was A Little Anarchy. And also because...
Very critically aware of your father.
Yes.
Very using Koval.
Grudgingly Koval.
Yes. But so yeah, I mean, those were my top three options, and that left A Little Anarchy. Also, it was important to rename it to Anarky with a K because it turns out that Anarky Films with a CHY is a porn production studio in LA. And if you Google Anarky Films with CHY, you get hits that you might not necessarily want your SEO throwing up. So
hey, on a long enough timeline, all content is pornography. So
I mean, yeah, you know what? In retrospect, I'm just thinking I should have just run with it because it would have gotten me more traffic. But at that time, I was a bhattu, and I don't know. I think I should have just stuck with the CH.
No, I think the K works. It totally works.
Yeah.
No reason to redirect your potential customers to unknown sources of pleasure.
Yes.
So yeah, I think the K works. Namaah, it's so great to have you on the podcast.
It's so great to be here.
Yeah, I mean, not just because I'm married to you, but also because I know your passion for entertainment and for content.
I feel like it's very hard for anyone not to know. I like walk up to random strangers and recommend things to them all the time. So it's kind of a thing I do now.
Yeah, which is why it's great to have you here, right? But this wasn't always what you did, right? For a while, you worked in advertising. You had a brief stint running a production house. You worked at Hotstar in the communications team. So what's this journey like, and how did you end up at Qyuki?
So I have been a creative types. I'm using air quotes, but you can't see them right
She
now.
really is one of the creative types.
Yeah, no. So I grew up away from land on the sea. My dad was in the merchant navy, and I grew up with a lot of coloring books, a lot of books that were way ahead of my reading grades, and a mum and a dad who were both reading enthusiasts and coloring book enthusiasts. And that kind of like even though I feel like, I mean, looking back, I feel like my rebellion was मुझे engineer बनना है. And my parents were like, nahi, tum artist bano. You know, so I had a very reverse sort of, the Indian middle class dream was kind of reversed on me, where my parents were like, you must be creative. So I kind of ran with it because I felt like, theek hai, kam padhai karni padegi, and I can start making money much earlier. I can be financially independent. I can travel as everybody at that age wants to. And I stumbled into advertising as one bright, quirky, manic pixie dream girl in her late teens, early 20s does in Bombay. And then I was like, let's do this and then see where we go from here. But as content is now, at the time, the content word hadn't become this much of a sort of, blue sky word or whatever. It wasn't so all-encompassing. So advertising, and specifically digital advertising back in the day, kind of was the new cool thing for people to do. Of course, people with skills became designers like I did, and people who wrote became copywriters, which is a very personal joke. I will take that back. People either became copywriters or they became art directors. For me, I always had an interest in the both. So my first boss was very, very compassionate. I went to him and declared that he was my boss. He wasn't. But I went to him and I said, you are my boss. And he said, okay, you will do both copy and you will do art. And I make sure that you will do both of them well. And with a few months, almost a year of mentorship under him, I kind of learned the tricks of the trade. And then I started freelancing alongside. So I was doing everything from illustration, which is my mainstay passion, what I do for fun. And a lot of political comics, a lot of just, random internet comics as they were back in the day, and a lot of writing on the side as well. So I kind of took that thread and then ran with it for the rest of my career. I just wanted to go where I would be allowed to use my voice because as I do now, I think back then I did have not a unique perspective, but a perspective nonetheless that I wasn't hearing enough of. So I was like, chalo, apne aap hi banate hain content. And I started using social media very early on to sort of put all of that stuff out there. I worked for a bit at Array, which was a great platform for me to put my political content out, political comics out there, because at the time it was a small place. I was one of the first employees there, and for the first few months we didn't know what we were doing. Then when we launched with a few of my political comics, which now I feel like I would not go down very, very well. This is, of course, a few years earlier. So things were a little more chill then, but JNU had just happened. So that was a great sort of launch pad where I got I feel like I did get a little bit of myself out there, put that out there, and it got really, really cool reception. So I felt like, okay, now this is it. Now this is what I have to do. Because not only are people obviously liking and sharing, but they're reaching out with their stories. They're sort of talking to me about things, and that in its own small way is a position of power. Right?
What I remember very fondly about the stuff you did at Array was it was a time when video was really becoming in vogue, while people were wondering if text or image content actually works. Without actually putting a lot of effort and thought into creating content that might be shareable, right? The reception that you spoke about usually is about how widely this gets shared, right? And your work there was, to me, like a proof point of, hey, you can still make non-video content that still has a voice. And I'm not talking about the Happy Tuesday stuff that people keep sharing on WhatsApp and share chat, but meaningful stuff that's only image based. So that was very interesting. I was at TVF at that time, and I don't think any creator or creator brand that was not only doing memes went that route. So there you had the Rajnikant versus CID and the Log Kya Kahenge of the world, who were making text-based meme content or image-based meme content. But there was nothing that came out with the kind of polish that Array had, at least in the initial days. So yeah, that was quite revolutionary at that time.
I agree. In fact, I think I've never told you this. I actually used to use the stuff you were doing and show it to my designer and my team as a reference for how to do it right.
That is
Quite
so
often.
sweet. Thank you. Thanks, both of you. Wow, that is lovely to hear. No, it was obviously great to be at a place like that because I had all the freedom to do whatever I wanted because there was no template. There was just content banate hain, let's see what works, and let's just do more of what works. And the more sort of not polarizing, but the more sort of invigorating it is, let's just do more of that, because that no one is doing. The reason people are invigorated by it is because they suddenly feel like they're saying exactly what I've been thinking. And it seems like I'm a minority, but here, at least for the urban sort of more SEC A plus people, it seemed like, okay, here's a magazine that is run out of where we live that still sort of matches our perspective, the global desi perspective we have. So it was obviously very nice to have that. But from there, I've been meandering through sort of digital content company to digital content company. I was at Hotstar for a while, as you mentioned, of course, which was, a completely different ballgame because it's huge. It's a huge place and it's very overwhelming. It was, of course, an easy job to have because, they have one person or two people for every sort of thing that there is to do. So it was comfortable. But post that, when I came to Qyuki, which has only been about 5 months, I feel like these 5 months have been have sort of made up for 5 years that I was taking it a little easy and like doing a lot more fun work, because in these 5 months I've learned more than I have I think since my first stint at Grey, which is a huge deal because I'm in a new sort of pond here where I'm working with creators, as we're now calling them, right, instead of just calling them influencers, because they're actually people who are taking content very, very seriously, creating content not as a hobby and then just kind of hitting the mark, but revolutionizing the way content is not only consumed but also created, whether that is through format or through the sincerity they put into their formats or their content, and most importantly through the kind of people creating this content. When I speak specifically about TikTok, which I'm sure we'll come to later, but I feel like the democratization of content that's happened via TikTok is as revolutionary as it comes, at least in like a short span of time. As we've been exposed to the digital sort of landscape, I think TikTok really sort of changes the game. So that's what I'm excited by right now. That's what I'm working with right now, and I don't know how I found myself here, but I'm just really happy that I did.
That's fantastic. I think it's great that over time we have people who have a certain... it's very interesting the way you put it, that you may not have a unique perspective, but a perspective nonetheless. Hey, that's better than what the Congress party is doing. But it's great that people who have conviction in how they want to approach this space are finding their way into places that help move the industry along. Let me come to what is Mudde Ki Baat for this episode. Like I said before, the reason you guys are here is because you're... What was it? Content aficionados?
No, it's enthusiasts.
Enthusiasts,
Okay.
right. Content enthusiasts.
I'm just mildly enthusiastic about everything, including content.
Yeah, but that's okay. I mean, mild is good at this time, considering the political situation as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, coming back to our 2019 retrospective on content, right? What were some standout moments of the year for you? And later we'll drill down into specific genres and specific types, but at a 30,000 feet POV, what really stood out from 2019 for you guys?
Was
Koval?
there, I mean, I think for most of the English TV watching world, you'd agree that the utter horrific disappointment laid upon us by Game of Thrones series finale would be it. Like, I don't think people have been so united in expressing their absolute disappointment and grief. If you turn that into how people in India respond to political situations, we'd have an actual democracy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think David and DB wanted to move on to Star Wars, and then that didn't work out with Netflix, and they're kind of back to square one and doing what they were doing previously. But yeah, Game of Thrones was a big, big disappointment. I think, I tuned in this season not hoping for a lot of like in-depth writing, because they did run out of material, the source material, but the level of fan service that they went for, right? I mean, literally giving us a Clegane Bowl was just, it was the saddest thing to see, right? Clegane Bowl felt like cutscenes from an old God of War game, and there were like elements from Game of Thrones. But what's still interesting is that a piece of content like that, piece of entertainment like that, which has sort of very little grounding in the in public consciousness in terms of the source material. Like when you think back to Lord of the Rings in 2001, Lord of the Rings was massive property, right? Like 50 years of Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion, The Hobbit, whatever. Game of Thrones didn't come with that, right? Game of Thrones came with, there are these really thick books that nobody has read, but now there's a show about it. The show has a lot of sex in it. From there to sustain it over 8-9 years, almost a decade, and generate the kind of public appeal that they did. I mean, you only ever see that in maybe a Marvel movie, right? I mean, that level of public engagement with a creative product is hard. So I think that's the win, right? Where they failed was trying to keep that win alive by making sure fans remember them for giving them what they wanted, as opposed to delivering a great story, just well told. And you had dragons.
Yeah, how do you mess that up? It really does bother me. It keeps me up at night.
And that ending.
That ending.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, what that ending was just, nobody could see that coming, which is also a good thing. I mean, I'm guessing they managed to keep us surprised, but that ending was total bullshit.
A surprise at what cost though, right? Like when it comes to Game of Thrones, when you're talking about milestones within the year, entertainment wise or whatever, I think one of the parallels that's super symptomatic of what happened this year is I'd like to draw parallels between two things where the source material is sacred but not very well known, that have been adapted into the television format: Game of Thrones and The Watchmen by the HBO show. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, Watchmen has only had one season, but I think what Watchmen did get right as a sign of the times is that I think a lot of content creators, and when I say content, and I hate this about myself, but I mean entertainment in general, all kinds of stuff that we're consuming via media. Authenticity is, in a way, playing a part again. And the reason I see that that's happening is because a lot of people are engaging with content creators and not just the content they create.
Right.
So, I mean, when you had celebrities back in the day, they'd do their thing, like they'd make a movie, they'd make a music video, and then they made promote it on social media, or they may promote it using digital platforms. Now, the creators pretty much live on social media. They're famous because of their usage of social media. So, fans or people consuming content or people consuming entertainment, watchers, viewers, whatever you want to call them, are becoming more and more engaged with the authenticity of the creation or of the larger sort of product, if that's the most late capitalist way to put it, but I guess that's what it is. So what Game of Thrones did is sort of take fan service to a point where they lost the plot, and they also lost what was good about the show, is that it often didn't give us what we wanted, right? With spoiler alert, but with like killing off Ross or with killing off Oberyn, right? That was stuff we really, really didn't want, and it happened, and we loved the show more for it because it was able to surprise us. And in a 2019, when nothing is surprising anymore, nothing is disappointing anymore, that kind of like jaded millennial life that we're living, what Watchmen does is, I think, exactly the opposite. It does not take the source material too seriously, whilst also doing it absolute justice by adapting the ethos of the source material and adapting it for the world we live in, and creating a smash hit piece of visual grandeur. And also just, it's a multi-sensory, amazing show to watch, simply because it talks about so much while staying within the universe that we hadn't even I'm a huge Alan Moore fan. I've read the Watchmen comics as much times as I can. I can't even tell you how many times, but With Watchmen, I think what the creators have been able to do is do justice to the adaptation again by making sure the authenticity of the ethos is maintained. And that, I think, if Game of Thrones could look at how that's done and kind of go back and do it again, see how fan service is done while also remaining authentic, I think they'd be able to do it better. Of course, also, the technical stuff of them having to do Star Wars and all of that not being in the way.
I mean, what really stands out from Game of Thrones and how you very eloquently talked about Watchmen, I want to bring in one more piece here, right? Another massive saga that came to, an end of sorts this year was the Avengers, the end of phase 3, right? And I mean, I was blown away by Endgame, right? I mean, I'm not a big superhero movie fan. It feels like cheating usually. But Endgame was awesome, right? I mean, the last superhero movie that I had that much fun in was like Black Panther. But even within Endgame, they were able to find that balance between what is genuine fan service. So, for example, the whole Captain America, Black Widow thing, and he goes back, alternate timeline, all of that, versus the real emotional core of that story, which is Iron Man, the leader of the pack, the guy who started this whole thing, sacrificing himself, etc., etc.
So I think the difference between what the creators of Game of Thrones did and what Avengers did was basically a function of competence. Effectively. I'm sorry, that's...
Oh well, I mean, we still have the sort of spin-offs to look forward to, so let's hope some of them are good. But yeah, Game of Thrones, I think, stood out as the biggest disappointment around the world, apart from India losing in the semi-finals of the World Cup.
No, I don't think as many people cared. I mean, I can tell you that I don't even care for Avengers movies, and I'm sorry to any cricket fans listening in, but it's just Avengers is a phenomenon that we're going to talk about for a while because it sets the template for something or sets the template for an entire phase to come after, for an entire phase of whatever Disney is going to do after this, right? Or whatever Marvel Studios is going to do after this, because the people have spoken, right? And I think the response was generally very, very good for
also,
Endgame.
I mean, Avengers is also one of those things where, there was a generation that grew up with DC, where you only thought about Batman and Superman and all the ancillary characters. And then suddenly somewhere while we were growing up, and the people who are now possibly in their 20s, early to mid-20s, they've grown up where... I mean, your DC universe has obviously gone sort of into the background and Avengers kind of took over. And pop culture has kind of completely been flooded with Avengers and the MCU. And I think it's also interesting that we when we were talking about what happened this year earlier, we forgot that some of the best TVs also, I mean, according to me at least, has come out from MCU. Like Daredevil, the last season was this year.
Yeah.
Jessica Jones also.
Oh yeah, I never got to that one.
It's
Jessica
crazy.
Jones,
I mean,
yeah.
this
But they had to shut a bunch of those down. Yeah, they had to shut down Iron
that's
Fist.
unfortunate. But, I mean, Daredevil even...
Daredevil, I think, was a standout show.
It is brilliant.
First couple of
so,
seasons.
I mean, I think it's just one of those things where from a certain bunch of these characters that we grew up, even as fundamental as... It's not even like a SECAA plus thing, like everywhere in the world, kids know what a Batman is, what a Superman is, and that suddenly changed in terms of consciousness to Iron Man and Thanos and this and that. So I think that's something that will probably go on for a while now.
But I might have a bias because I was one of those people growing up who was like, I'm a DC person, Marvel sucks and all of that.
Yeah.
And somewhere deep down inside, I'm still like that. And that had nothing to do with Batman. With a lot of people, it had to do with Batman. But with me, it had to do with Alan Moore. Because I was like, if it's good enough for Alan Moore, it's good enough for me. That was my takeaway from the Marvel DC fight. But I think that DC generally has always been a lot more character driven in its storytelling, or in its sort of even in its comic books, has been a lot more character led. Like when you look at even Batman, right, the most popular character, I'm going to assume, since at least the Christopher Nolan films, there is many different shades of Batman. Of course, that's true of Marvel also, but Marvel's always been about turn up and fight and usko like dishum and then you save the day. And that's great. That has a place, but I don't know that it's as on a long on a sort of long timeline. I don't know that it stays with you as much. Whereas for DC kind of stays with you because you kind of grew up with a character and you kind of see a character go through different phases, not just within that universe, but also in the world, interacting with the world around them and kind of growing from one phase to another, whether that's the Joker or whether that's Batman or whether that's anybody else, even for that matter some of the non-mainstay DC characters. So I think that's why DC does better with TV shows because they get kind of a longer time span to work with. Yeah, you can create that arc, whereas in a movie it's like, come on, let's do dishum and then forget it. I mean, you can't put all those Marvel characters in one frame and say Avengers assemble and it's not going to be cool. Like that's kind of a cheat code, as you said earlier, Vineet, that it seems like a bit of a cop-out for the lack of a better word, but I mean, it's not, because it was grand, it was fun, and I don't remember a lot of what happened in the film, even though I watched it twice now, but I do remember having fun throughout. So I guess that's important. There was, yeah.
A lot of dishum.
Yeah.
And I mean, they did that Avengers Assemble fan service bit as well, and they did it very nicely. That whole massive battle sequence was beautiful to watch, right? I remember being blown away by the battle scenes in The Return of the King, right? Those were some massive scenes, and this was just took it to another level, right? It felt like, whoa, it felt believable, it felt authentic, it felt exciting, it felt right as far as storytelling is concerned, as consuming story is concerned. And to contrast that with the Justice League 2 movie actually getting pushed out from this year. It's supposed to be a June release. They quietly moved the release dates. There's a world of difference between what a Marvel has been able to achieve, especially with Disney backing, versus what DC has really been able to cobble together. I think Wonder Woman, that was last year, right?
I mean, the new one's coming out.
And the new one's coming out. And the new one looks quite interesting as well.
Is the new one also Zack Snyder?
I think so.
Wow, okay. More on that later.
Well, yeah, Zack Snyder is also doing the Justice League 2 movie. So I think Zack Snyder has his... Zack Snyder is the J.J. Abrams for the DC universe.
Oh, well,
right?
That's not as much of a compliment anymore.
It really isn't, but it is.
And I say this without having watched any Star Wars movies. I know I call myself a content enthusiast, but this is one bandwagon I refuse to get on.
I think it's run its course, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
I know people get excited. The Star Wars movie came out, last week? And people get very excited. But I find it, as someone who's spent a lot of my teenage years wasting them on Star Wars stuff, I just can't get excited about that shit enough.
It would be like getting into Game of Thrones now. You know what I'm saying? Like for me, too much time has passed. Like now it just seems like I know exactly what's going to happen because I've seen all the memes about it.
No, that still makes sense. Getting into Game of Thrones as a contemporary catch up of what I'm trying to, of what my friends are watching versus Star Wars, which was once relevant and then tried to be relevant again at the beginning of the decade, and now Lucasfilm is just milking it for all it's worth. Which is great. For the entertainment business, it's fantastic, but I'm just not enthused. Staying with film though, what were some of the best Hindi movies you saw this year? I'll start. Andhadhun, I think, was a standout film. I think I usually never watch a Hindi movie twice. But Andhadhun I ended up watching twice just to enjoy it again. It was just a great movie. I know Ayushmann Khurrana has had a good year playing a lot of interesting offbeat, what the early 2000s you'd call multiplex cinema. But within that gamut of films, there's Badhai Ho, there was Article 15.
Yeah, I think we were talking about that earlier where it was, obviously it had its own problems, but it was possibly the sort of most courageous attempt within mainstream Bollywood to address the idea of caste altogether. And they didn't really sort of tiptoe around it. They went all in. So that was nice to watch.
But let me ask you this, especially about Article 15. And Namaah brought this up earlier about the authenticity of the storyteller, right? I'm not saying that a storyteller can't tell a story if he's not experienced it himself. There's always secondary material, there's always interviews, research, all of that goes into telling a story. But what did you think of Savarna Brahmin man directing a caste-based movie.
I think it is now 2020. I think we have reached a place where we do expect voices to be more authentic all around. So it's not even, like people say things about diversity hires, this, that, representation. But it's very simple. The minute you have somebody who is from, say, a lower caste, a part of your writing team or your directorial or your creative team, it is obviously going to add more to the story.
Right.
There's no two ways about it. So that was my primary issue with it, that you can't have an entire film about how upper castes are committing atrocities on lower castes, where every single name on that poster is upper caste. That just, so it no longer is about diversity, this, that, representation. It just feels like it's lip service. It feels gimmicky. So then you go into it knowing that no matter how well they've done it or whatever their intention was, they're not buying into their own messaging.
Right.
So that, I think that's where it fell.
I mean, that disconnect feels like someone did an opportunity map of stories to be told in India and what might be relevant, and caste came out as one of the opportunities, and they said, cool, let's make a caste-based movie. But, I mean, props to people who are actually telling these stories. I'm take nothing away from them, sure. But I think it's the start of an interesting journey. If we're, as a society in India, willing to have this conversation at the scale of a movie, I'll take it.
And that too with someone like Ayushmann Khurrana, who people go to watch now, from what I know. I haven't watched Article 15, but, and sorry to be boring, but I just... the idea of Bollywood of late, especially this past year, with the exception of the fantastic film you just named, Andhadhun, which was, I watched it twice, and we watched it together twice, and it was fantastic in a lot of different ways, because it did what a movie should traditionally, I suppose, do for you, which is entertain you, but then also from a filmmaking perspective, it was very, very interesting. The way it used music, I thought, was very interesting. And obviously I'll watch anything with Dabu in it, so there's that.
She was great as well.
She's great. She's always great. She's fantastic. But I had a very non-Bollywood year this year around, because it just, even with Article 15, a lot of the parts of me that are drawn to content or drawn to film or drawn to TV shows wanted to watch it, specifically because of the caste angle, and also because I know that Ayushmann, while his politics may be a little different from mine, is a good performer overall. I just couldn't get myself to do it, because as it happens, when you're on a Twitter or on Instagram, you read reviews of things before you watch them, and I already knew I was going to come out angry, because all throughout my life I've been very sort of obstinate about the socio-political aspect of things when it comes to who gets to tell a story, right? Like you guys were just saying that you can't have an entire cast of upper caste Brahmin or Savarna people sort of talking about lower caste issues, and it just seems that to then give that kind of entertainment an audience does seem sort of like creating demand for it. So I do very much enjoy watching stuff that I know has been done by diverse voices. I mean, not to go away from film, but I mean, this year alone has had some great examples of Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Phoebe Waller-Bridge doing all women writer rooms, making stories for women by women that resonate with women, but not necessarily just with women, right? They resonate with the masses in general. And it is proof of the fact that the moment you diversify your writer's room, or the moment you bring more perspective, not just about using empathy as sort of a talking point and saying we empathize with this sect of people, or we empathize with this section of society, but actually employing those people to tell their stories, that's when the authenticity angle is at its best, right? That's when you're really creating...
And the content is better. It is objectively better.
Absolutely. It's more nuanced. Like when you look at something like Court, right? Court was also a film that, I mean, of course, it didn't happen last year, but it was also a film that talked about caste-based issues. And it was, I haven't watched Article 15, but it's a film that left me truly, it left me in tears, because it was powerful, right? It was powerful to see all of that happen. It was very powerful to see it happen in a regional language. So when it comes to Indian film, I'm actually trying to watch more and more regional stuff. And thanks to Hotstar's great collection of Malayalam films and some Kannada films and some Telugu films, there has been some really, really good good stuff that's happening in the country. I'm just afraid it's not happening on the Bollywood end, because the stakes are, I suppose, fairly high to make those kind of... I mean, we're living in a very interesting political climate where if you start making a big budget movie right now, tomorrow there's going to be 13 issues that come and go in between. So I suppose that's also a gamble. And also, it's, you know, the Indian masses go to movies to enjoy movies. They go to be entertained with their family. They don't want to come back feeling heavy. I mean, my own aunts and uncles and mum also would maybe say, oh, that movie was too depressing or too heavy for me, and come back not feeling very happy. So more power to the people.
I mean, that's why you have a market for Houseful.
Absolutely. Or like worse, like Kartik Aaryan still has a career, a thriving career. And so apparently in 2019 or 2020, it's still okay to go out and make WhatsApp jokes of dialogues, and it's okay. Like everyone's just like clapping and having a good time. Which, I mean, there's an audience for it, and you don't get to sort of, you know, sneer down at the audience, but you do then get to sort of feel badly about the fact that there are people who should know better, because they do come from a storytelling background, who are telling stories that have been told for a very, very long time and telling them in exactly the same ways. Right? Not even turning the lens and saying, look at how silly this man looks saying these things. Actually justifying that with a happy ending.
But he did have a good year. I mean, who would have thought Sonu Ki Titu Ki Sweetie would make 100 crores? So, I mean, at some level, again, the opportunity for that kind of storytelling does exist. How the codes may change and how people are bringing more nuance and authenticity to that storytelling, well, that's a developing conversation. But whatever said and done, Kartik Aaryan has had a pretty good year. I mean, he just
so
did
you can
this.
add that right above the disappointment of Game of Thrones. Yeah.
Disappointed but not surprised.
No,
that's what I'm slotting this.
I'm actually terribly disappointed in Kartik Aaryan because he did that movie with Ananya Pandey, and it was like Main Meri Biwi Aur Wo or something like that.
That's the one I'm talking about. Yeah.
Like, why?
But that was exactly my reaction.
I think it was
as well.
a very clickbaity sort of attempt.
Absolutely.
And it worked. So there we go.
Absolutely.
And we do live in polarized times where it's just, as long as what you are saying is getting a reaction out of people, enough masses will gather around that sentiment.
Speaking of polarized times, here's a movie that polarized a lot of opinion. Kabir Singh. Did any of you watch it?
Can't bring myself to.
No, I'm very
Won't
easily
ever watch
triggered.
Kartik Aaryan, cannot watch Kabir Singh.
Well, Kabir Singh was interesting. I didn't catch the entire movie. I skimmed through it. It was interesting because they really, I mean, went back to a sort of over-energized yet distraught Tere Naam Salman Khan sort of aesthetic, but done very, very differently. It was what was terrible was after the whole criticism of Kabir Singh for being misogynistic, for being just a generally regressive take on relationships. The director came out and said stuff to back up
violence
against women. Yeah.
Soul of love.
Yes.
Yeah, that whole thing.
I mean, the biggest testimony to why Kabir Singh is trash fire is the fact that on Twitter and a lot of other social media platforms, invariably the most misogynistic, most sexist, most violent comments come from, well, men who have Kabir Singh as their display picture.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very clear linkage in my mind that Kabir Singh represented and also enabled for a lot of men possibly some of the worst instincts towards women.
And I mean, it makes me think of how Fight Club, the film, was misinterpreted for what it stood for masculinity. I mean, I'm going to say misinterpreted because, well, that's what I think it was. It doesn't really stand for masculinity. It stands for the flaws of masculinity. And that clear link is that it became a dog whistle for sort of, I wouldn't say MRAs, because MRA is just very niche community sort of, but it did become a dog whistle for men to celebrate sort of their machismo without any reason to celebrate it, like just because we have it, which was odd. And I mean, I was for one very glad to see the reaction to Kabir Singh in general, not just from the intellectual circles, but even commonplace people were like, no, my mom was like, no, this is shit, I can't watch this. And my mom's an Amitabh Bachchan fan, so you know where that goes. But staying with movies that caught the imagination in good way or
I
bad.
saw Drive, the Indian version.
Oh yeah? Oh shit. Wow, you put yourself through that?
I did.
I couldn't sit through the trailer.
It was an interesting experience.
I could not sit through the
It
trailer.
was a very interesting experience, I will say.
We'll come back to Drive. But staying with movies that caught the public imagination
War?
in a big way was...
War?
We'll come to that. I know you want to talk about Tiger
No, but
Shroff.
did it?
No, the movie that I have in mind genuinely did. For reasons good or bad, was How's the Josh?
Oh,
Uri?
right. That was a movie that
Yeah.
happened. That was this year. Now it seems really long.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was
This is
year.
the year India started making propaganda movies. No, in a big
I
way.
mean, it's been happening for a while, but yeah, this I think there was a barrage of like military focused.
Yeah,
हमारे
yeah.
जवान जो लड़ रहे हैं हमारे लिए और हम यहाँ पर Twitter पे complain कर रहे हैं. That entire like that contrast happened very quickly.
It's such a contrast from Lakshya, right? Like where
Yeah.
it's such a... Because when I first heard about Uri, I obviously didn't watch it, but when I heard about it, I kept thinking about when you go back to Lakshya and you show how army is represented, how masculinity within the context of army is represented and what it meant then
Yeah.
and how it is now. And it's a huge leap. It's almost like with movies like Uri, with Kabir Singh, there's like a sort of, and Kartik Aaryan still having a career, there is definitely a regression of sorts as well.
Definitely,
So while
yeah.
one part of the industry and the entertainment world is moving forward or trying to, there's an equal part that is very, very like sort of actively holding on to this very toxic, very sort of regressive way of things. And that's why Houseful and so on, so they keep getting 4, 5, 6, 7 remakes. And it's like, it's crazy because I keep thinking, what will it take? Where, I mean, it's so terrible because of Netflix. We have access to things like Watchmen, to Phoebe Waller-Bridge's work, or Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and we all love it. And people who live in cities and who consume things like Netflix and Amazon Prime, we constantly are bombarded with all these very interesting ways of looking at the world. And yet, closer home, for the most, we still have a Houseful and T2, Tweety, Sweetie, and among
Sonu
other-
ki Titu ki Sweetie.
Sono ki Titu ki Tweety.
Sweetie.
Tweety.
Right.
That's the sequel. It's just like Houseful had the latest sequel, Bring Your Daughter to Work Day.
There was also something called Good News, I believe, that came out
Oh
recently.
no, it's coming out now. I know this because I keep getting...
It came out.
It did? Okay,
Yeah.
I keep getting served as a virtue to my age.
It made 56 crores on the first weekend.
Yeah, Lord.
Yes, that's... So yeah, there we have. You have Watchmen and you have Good News, and they all exist in the same...
on the same
cinematic
streaming
universe.
platforms,
Yes.
exactly, and especially for people, for more urban classes and for people who have English at least as their first or second language, local content or Indian content is not just competing with other Indian content, it is competing with international content now, right? Like I know, for example, your dad watches Arrow on Netflix, right? Whilst also watching, I'm guessing he will watch a serial as well that'll be on Sony
Bhabhi Ji
or
Ghar Pe Hain.
Bhabhi Ji Ghar Pe Hain, right? And that is a wide range, and he enjoys both, and both are available to him at the click of a button.
Yeah.
And there's something great about that, right? There is something great about the fact that people are able to find content that gratifies them rather than TV on karo. What is on TV? Let's watch because we need to watch it, because we need to watch something, right? Because our drawing rooms are oriented towards the TV, so let's do that as a family. But I think we don't, like what we were saying about, just to go back to what we were talking about with regards to films and like that hyper-militarization of film for a second, specifically around the general elections. I think just very recently I was thinking about Rang De Basanti, which happened in 2006. Right? It was 13 years ago? 13,
Yeah.
almost 14
6,
years
7,
ago?
yeah.
Yeah. And imagine that movie happening
I
right
think Rang
now.
De Basanti was-
It didn't seem that radical at the time. But imagine something like that happening now.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would get made. Right? And that's that kind of regression, because that was a mainstream film that did well, no matter how like I don't consider myself patriotic in the general sense. Of course, I do love what the idea of India and the Constitution and all of that, but I have never felt like, oh, nationalist pride or any of that. However, that movie moved me. It moved me because it made me feel like, look at the youth talking about real on-ground issues, sort of rallying around, sort of mobilizing around an agenda that seems kind of radical to me when I was, I don't know, I must have been 15 when it came out. And the fact that something like that at that scale would not be made today.
So I think it's also maybe interesting to note that politics has very much entered content and how it's made and distributed. And it has been for a while, but I think it's very pointed now. In a sense, it's not just localized to WhatsApp and social media platforms, but it shapes, for the first time in India at least, I feel, Bollywood's core messaging and alliances and so on and so forth. And I think we'll probably see more of that happening in the next 4 or 5 years. And that should be quite interesting too. I mean, I foresee more and more series and more movies aligned towards political propaganda and messaging. And I mean, yeah, we will devise a way to sort of talk about it / critique it or just sort of dismantle that, hopefully.
No, and it's always happened. You look at Hollywood and the CIA, you look
Riefenstahl
at
in Hitler's Germany.
Hitler, or for that matter, Goebbels in Hitler. We've always had a political footprint in entertainment, especially stuff that reaches scale. Right. I think to talk about that in contrast with the swing that we've seen, what you were talking about in terms of Rang De Basanti is a much more sort of inward-looking expression of youthful rebellion, kind of covered from all sides, right? You have the cast of 6-7 characters, everyone bringing their own shit to the table, and then you have that being militarized for propaganda with stuff like Uri. I mean, I know everyone ends up looking at Uri in a different light because, well, Vicky Kaushal is sort of immensely likable. I mean, for all purposes, it's quite a decent movie. And they had that whole How's the Josh catchphrase going for it. But what was very interesting was the lineup of movies that followed in 2019, right? So it was, there was Uri, there was the Narendra Modi film, my God.
Oh, the Vivek Oberoi one. That's something I blocked out.
I blocked it out,
but there was a series also, I believe, which is ongoing.
So the series was the one that got a stay. They had to release it later, after the elections.
Did you guys read that article? I think one of those online publications had done about the general sort of rise of the upper class Hindu male in like this religious, ancient storytelling kind of unfolding over the last few years, and how interesting that is. Like this very revivalist tendency within Indian content and cinema. And I've forgotten completely who had published it, but it was kind of doing the rounds on Twitter and whatnot.
Now, I remember reading one piece along similar lines that looked at Madhavan's character, and this was about 3-4 months ago. It looked at Madhavan's character, or Madhavan's characters over the years, and how he's gone from playing the romantic good bad boy to the casteist protector. He's playing characters that beats up minorities, that beats up miscreants in quotes.
Wow, really?
I mean, and it's not as violent as a Kabir Singh, but
it's there.
But it's there,
right.
Absolutely there. I mean, that's what makes this sort of entertainment game so interesting, right? I mean, we can sit in a room and slag off or praise movies that we don't like or like respectively, but at the end of the day, when the market turns around and gives you 150 crores, 200 crores, a national award, right? Validation for that content does come from different quarters, right? And my sense is it's important to realize and to look at this within the confines of the ecosystem it exists in, right? I mean, I'm just going to put it out there. You've not seen any of Bollywood come out and talk about CA, and I don't think Saini Gupta is Bollywood, right?
Yeah.
Neither is Siddharth or Sushant Singh, the people who have been vocal.
Or Anurag Kashyap, for that matter. Anurag Kashyap is the most anti-Bollywood guy in the world.
I think the cutest responses to them have been Renuka Shahane and Ashutosh Rana.
Oh, they're so lovely. They're my favorite celebrity couple right now. They're just wholesomely good at being people and being celebrities.
Yeah. So apart from them, not much really.
Correct. And that's because, I wouldn't say they're complicit, but that's because they're afraid. The government has something on them. And
I mean, Sushant Singh did lose his job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that happened.
Absolutely. So that's where I leave our sort of broadside at films. Some important mentions that we should talk about before we round this segment off. There was this one movie which also felt very inauthentic to me, but but I see its value in bringing a very important culture to the mainstream. There's this movie called Gully Boy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think super critical and super important that someone starts telling these stories as aspirational, right? I mean, for a second, I can take the authenticity bullet on this and be like, okay, cool, that's fine. You don't have to tell. You don't have to be from Kurla to tell a story about Kurla. You can be from Bandra West or Bali Hill and tell a story about Kurla. That's fine. But I think it was very important that such a movie got made. I think Gully Boy did for hip-hop what Chak De sort of did for hockey, women's hockey especially. This is very, very heartening to see. I think it gave a fillip to the entire hip-hop movement, gave it sort of validation in a very different way. There was also the movie that Cole wants to talk about, is War, right? Where you had two people who can't act fight.
So the reason I was talking about it earlier was I saw Drive, which you'd expect is absolutely terrible. And it is. It's absolutely terrible.
Most of it is CGI.
Yes, most of it is very poorly done CGI and flop effects. You know, like, so in Jamia we were taught to edit on something called a vision mixer, which were these giant like manual devices that the Doordarshan studios used back in the 80s and the 70s. And it felt like parts of Drive were edited on a vision mixer.
So there is some like vintage value to it.
It's just there's a Tata Nano being super souped to drive and drag race. So I mean that's suspension of disbelief. But that said,
so what genre is it? Is it fantasy? Is it sci-fi?
No, it's just a heist movie.
Okay, lovely.
Yes,
cool.
War on the other hand was big budget. It had everything going, and yet it was so bad. It was worse than Drive. And it had the most confusing homosexually charged erotic sort of subcurrent going on that it's impossible to deny. At some point, I mean, Tiger Shroff and Hrithik Roshan, they actually kind of almost accepted, because this other person, like, there was this one really strange dialogue about Tiger Shroff being jealous of Hrithik Roshan wanting to marry somebody else or some like they actually admit it. Because
so it's like a Moriarty and
no, it's worse, because or better, depending on how attractive you find these two people.
See, but now you've sold it to me. Like with the whole homoerotic angle, now I'm going to watch War, and I'm going to watch it with that lens.
Okay, the first half an hour is just them sort of gazing longingly at each other, and then naked torsos, and gazing longingly at each other, and then intense gazes.
I know you want to make me go ew, but you're making me go aw.
I'm not saying ew.
I will take even this representation of the LGBTQ community. No offense to them by likening two cishet men to what their struggle is with representation, but even if that is what it takes to normalize two men loving each other romantically, I'll take it. It was like, just, now you're making me want to watch it.
It was just confusing.
I mean, it's a distinct step up from Aligarh, isn't it?
Yes, and no, I mean, what can I say? There was also just at some point it did feel like a very long, really long ad for Cult Fit. Yeah, it did.
Oh shit, you're right. They're both brand ambassadors, and I can never tell them apart.
There was a lot of.
Hrithik has an extra finger.
He does. But if you don't remove the head up, you can't.
Oh, yeah, of course you can't. The thing is, when I saw the trailers for War, the first thought in my head was, didn't Hrithik Roshan do this with Dhoom?
So it's like a mashup of Dhoom meets Race meets Dhoom 2 meets Dhoom. It was a mashup movie.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But at the core of this movie was this beautiful, beautiful romance between two men who have great bodies and like to dance with each other.
Huh.
And I think that's my sales pitch for War.
So why didn't they just make it step up 4?
How much are they paying you?
It was excruciating to watch, apart from that particular aspect.
Super.
Yes. Drive, on the other hand, I highly recommend. You get high, or you're just very bored, you grab some popcorn, you watch it, and it's a trip. It's a psychedelic trip. That movie really is.
I will steer clear.
Alright, fair enough.
Rounding the section on films off,
we missed a very important one. An equally sort of polarizing movie from the year, Joker.
Oh yeah.
All right.
I mean, no conversation about film in 2019 is over without talking about Joker. Let me go first. I really liked Joaquin Phoenix's performance. I think there were elements in that film that could have been treated differently. I think could have been treated a little more sensitively about the kind of impact this would have on people in that state of mind. But that said, it felt like watching a different movie. My fear going into watching Joker was, hey, am I going to watch someone try to better Heath Ledger? And in a certain way, he did better Heath Ledger in certain points. I know, Koval, you don't like him for that. But he did. There was a depth to his performance. And I'm not talking about the film in general, not the film at large. But a certain depth in Joaquin Phoenix's Joker performance that I didn't find in Heath Ledger. There was a sort of manic entertainment about Heath Ledger's Joker.
Also, I sorry to cut in here, but I feel like Heath Ledger made it look easy.
Yeah, he did.
While Joaquin was laboring.
He was, but the laboring kind of added depth to the character in the sense that if it weren't for his performance, there was no film.
Thing. That's him as an actor.
Absolutely. He completely takes over.
You take the fact that Joaquin Phoenix is inherently a brilliant actor, and he brings that kind of gravitas and that seriousness to every role that he does. The movie didn't have that much going for itself. In fact, it felt so self-indulgent, self-pitying, and since we've already talked about it, I'm a huge Joker fan. Like, just Heath Ledger, just the idea of Joker.
Right.
To the point that if you walk into my office, there's some 7 different renditions. I mean, I have it tattooed on my body, and it's because of what it represents. Because one of the most exciting thing about the DC universe having a character like this, especially then brought to life by Heath Ledger, was it was ambiguous. It was grey. It was a little crazy. You kind of wanted to understand where it was coming from. It was challenging and so on and so forth. Whereas Joaquin Phoenix's character is basically a kind of, I mean, you can't remove a film from its socio-political context.
Absolutely.
If it's coming from a country where there are mass shootings every other week and there are gun shootings every single day, and then you have this character where this very white person is being constantly bullied. Like the first few frames are him being bullied by people of color, and then he takes to arms and he goes around shooting people and he goes back to. There is no, I don't see how he justified. That is the socio-political aspect of it. Secondly, it was just a very trite sort of film for me. I mean, the way they explained his whole seeing things and how he was kind of making it all up.
Yeah, I think montages need to die.
This sort of spoon feeding is something that I expect maybe in a relatively immature film industry, but not coming from mainstream Hollywood. And I think also when you have a character like the Joker, where you have an actor like Joaquin Phoenix. And it's so interesting because this one film I've had to argue the most about with all, even within my little privilege echo chamber, and obviously mostly with men and my male filmmaker friends, because the average male filmmaker friend that I have obviously loves this movie. And I had to really get into why it was this, it was that, and why it doesn't subscribe to DC's idea of Joker, and so on and so forth. And then when I brought up that I don't also like the camera work, they obviously completely lost it. But I don't like the camera work. It was terrible. It was constantly sort of hovering on me. But that's a subjective kind of opinion.
Absolutely.
I thought that it just, I think I'm going to make this like my category. It's like 2020, guys. It's just chill. You can't justify shit like that anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But people will, and people will continue to make shit like that.
But it's 2020, guys.
But it is. Right? And with that, we round off our section on film. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be back to talk about web series, reality, and documentaries.
Hey everybody, welcome to another amazing week on the IVM Podcast Network. You know what? Not just an amazing week. This is going to be an amazing year. We're looking forward to all the stuff that we're going to bring you in 2020. Please remember to fill out our survey, ivmpodcast.com/survey. That's going to really help us know what you guys want from us from 2020 as well, right? I mean, we'd really like to hear from you, so please do fill out that survey. It would be very helpful. Also, would like to thank our sponsors on the network this week. We have Intel, Cambly, and Storytel. Also, if you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It's a week of milestones. We have a couple of milestones this week. Geek Fruit released the 300th episode this week. What a journey it's been. Join Tejas and Dinkar as they celebrate this milestone by talking about HBO's new hit show Watchmen. Actually, surprisingly, at this point, Geek Fruit is the second oldest show on our network, so it's definitely a show if you haven't checked out, please do check out. Another milestone that we have is it's the 50th episode of our Kannada show Thalle Harate. So definitely do check that stuff out. And as for the rest of our regular programming, on Cyrus Says this week, Cyrus talks to actor Neil Bhopalam. On Advertising is Dead, Varun is joined by Anto Philip and Shreyas Jain, the founders of Under 25, to talk about how the Under 25 Summit came about and how they're building youth experiences by engaging in unique ways. On Storytellers and Storysellers, Vineet is joined by co-founder and CEO of Terribly Tiny Tales, Anuj Gosalia, and founder of Pocket Aces, Anirudh Pandita. They discuss how they manage the creative versus business conflict at the heart of any entertainment company. On the 50th episode of Thalle Harate, Pawan discusses CAA, NRC, and police reforms with Alok Prasanna and Saryu Natarajan, hosts of Ganatantra. They give insights on the current political scenario of the country and its implications on various sections of society. On Paperback, Rachita and Satyajit are in conversation with the host of Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav Mamoria, who shares his love of reading books that redefine travel for him. And with that, let's get on with your show.
Ladies and gentlemen, back on Storytellers and Storysellers with Koval Bhatia and Namaah Kumar talking about 2019 in content. Before the break, you heard us take apart and praise some of the films that came out last year. Let's pivot the conversation now to talking about digital content, especially web series. Nama, what were some of the international web series that you saw this year that really left a mark?
So speaking specifically of web series and not TV in general, right? I think that the last season of Orange is the New Black, it's very mainstream to kind of, I love prison dramas. There's just something about prison dramas that, I know that it's a sort of fetishization of oppression, which there is some problematic elements to it, but I think what Orange is the New Black was able to do with race commentary, specifically with the whole Black Lives Matter angle, was really powerful to watch. It's just very empowering to watch a show where there are no good men. It seems kind of misandrist on the face of it, but sometimes there is a lot of content that happens where there is a lot of men. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. Women come, they bring a chai biscuit cup plate, and then they go away. That's their entire role. So it's sometimes nice to have that flipped. So you have grey characters, you have white characters, you have black characters, you have, characters all across the board, and each one of them is well written. Each one of them, their backstories are empowering. Some of them obviously are just badass as hell. So that in terms of web series, I really liked because, again, it was symptomatic of something, right? It was, they went down the whole woke path where they were like, what are people talking about now? What are the hot trends? Let's talk about mental health, let's talk about race, let's talk about gender, let's talk about all of that. They did all of that, and somehow none of it seemed, at least to me, right, as a faraway audience to their immediate sort of American masses, it did seem like the story was told authentically. It did seem like justice was done for the most part, and that I really enjoyed, because I'm not against web series kind of co-opting the woke agenda. I'm in fact for it. Just do it nicely. Just get the right people to do it. Just get the right kind of angles. Get the right people to tell the stories. People who deserve to tell the stories because they have some lived experience of it, or at least the basic decency to do their due diligence, right?
Does Bojack count as a web series?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then, this is a year we've also said bye to Bojack.
Yeah. And that's a sad one.
That was a very sad one.
Yeah.
It's just one of those shows, again, where whenever I bring it up, I have enough friends who just they can't. They don't want to be that depressed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still one of my favorite Netflix shows.
Great show, man.
It is. It really is. I don't think anyone has not felt something watching Bojack.
Yeah.
And I think one of the good things about Bojack is, I think it started from a place of... so I read this very interesting article which kind of slightly briefly ruined Bojack for me. Which was basically, now forget the fact that he's a horse, and it's basically just a middle-aged white man feeling sorry for himself and being toxic. And that briefly ruined the show for me. Because I was like, oh no, we have been conned. But then they started...
they're very unabashed about the fact that...
And then I think what they did is that they brought up... they turned Diane's character around. Princess Carolyn's arc is what kind of started to really, really emerge, and that changed a lot of things. And then they sort of backgrounded Bojack and sort of also started commenting on how he needs to get over his self-pity and self-hatred.
Yeah.
I think that was quite. I mean, it's the first time you see that.
Absolutely.
Because most of all of Western literature, from the greats and the existentialists and whatnot to cinema, is always about this pained, lonesome man who's misunderstood and self-loathing and all of that. And here you have all of that, and then people telling him, well, then be better. And I think that was one of the coolest things about this show.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because we were talking about Joker just before this.
Yep.
And the lesson for the protagonist in Joker versus the lesson for the protagonist in Bojack Horseman is diametrically opposite, right? Where Joker, I mean, the message in Joker is constantly pushing him towards violent expression, whereas in Bojack it's, again, a lot more inward looking, a lot more desire to improve but not having the ability to, sort of, and then kind of becoming a toxic white mate to
and
everyone
then
around
also
you.
constantly people, Todd as a voice of reason, or just people around him telling him, okay, so you've had it rough and things have been bad, but just be better, like try, make an effort. And things are bad for everybody, boo-hoo, but you need to sort of also take culpability for what you do. And I think that was completely missing from Joker and is often.
Yeah.
I think one thing that does have middle ground on is that's trying to do Bojack while it has been doing Joker, and so many people are going to hate me for saying this because I know the fans are rabid. But Rick and Morty,
of course,
right? Yeah. They're trying to do this whole comeuppance arc with Rick being like, I'm a flawed character, but sorry, but Bojack did that. They did it better. They did it more consciously. So you do your fun jokes. Try not to always punch down, and the content is fun enough that people will continue to watch it. People are not watching it because you're constantly punching down.
But I think that's it's interesting that you bring that up, because what has changed for Rick and Morty in the first 3 seasons versus the 4th season is that now they have a runway. Right, till the 3rd season they were getting Royal and Harmon were getting 1 season commissioned at a time, and after the 3rd season they got a run of 7 seasons commissioned, right? That gives you the sort of canvas to recalibrate your character for longevity. And I think they've done it well. I mean, I know we disagree on this, and I'm a massive Rick and Morty fan, no matter the fascism allegations towards an animated character. I'm a big Rick and Morty fan. I think it's a super fun show, and I really want to see how they take this forward, how they humanize Rick a little more. They did it in the first 5 episodes of the
I'm
latest
just waiting
season.
for the Ultimate Community and Rick and Morty crossover, where I don't know.
That's gonna be a good one.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. It's the fan service death that Rick and Morty dies in season 10.
You know, but just to come back to what you were saying, I'm not against it. I'm also, a begrudging Rick and Morty fan, because it's hard not to be. They are doing some stuff that is deeply interesting, especially from the animation perspective, which I really enjoy. It is just, it's begrudging fandom, because I was like, you can be better, just be better.
I mean, among all of this,
just be better.
It is so unfortunate, right? That a show like Tuca and Bertie
gets cancelled. So good. Yes, absolutely.
And it suddenly sort of reminds you that there is that huge big problem where this show about 2 women by women is this, for all practical purposes, it's by some of the people who have made the shows that we all love, men love, but the minute it's a more female voice and a female gaze in animation and exploring that aspect in animation, suddenly people aren't that into it, or networks aren't that supporting of it, and that just is excruciating, because it's 2020, guys.
No, it's sad, because like I said, right, this is also the year that gave you Killing Eve season 2. It's also the year that gave you Fleabag, and I think we've all been blue in the face just talking about the sheer brilliance of these shows, right? The amount of people they've reached by sheer word of mouth. People talking about these things and how personal these stories are. And Tuca and Bertie, for me, fell in that same sort of bracket, where it wasn't telling a very new story, but it was telling it it was taking a lens on that story that felt personal to me. That strangely, even after all these years of watching and consuming content, global content, seemed kind of fresh, simply because it happened to be
also
without the male gaze. And also the animation.
Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just happy that the flag bearer of great female developed, female written, female produced entertainment is not Lena Dunham anymore.
That's
Yeah, I know it's still a white woman, whatever, but at least it's not Lena Dunham anymore.
Yeah.
Moving on from our gushing about Fleabag and Killing Eve, what were some of the memorable Indian web series that you saw?
So as you already know, Koval and I have very, very strong opinions on this. So I'm going to try and keep it as brief as possible. I'm going to take Skulls and Roses. You do Dilly Darlings, because I feel like we have our, we have our favorites. For me, Skulls and Roses was, I watched it and I watched it twice. You watched it twice.
I watched it twice.
Oh, wow.
Wow, that's a triple whammy.
That's 6 out of the 20 people who watched it.
Yeah, and that's some very discerning people giving a lot of time to a show we knew was going to end exactly the way it ended. But no, the reason that I stuck with it is because it was just so overwhelming, yet there was this one character that I just sort of stuck with, and I like begrudgingly got No,
Angel Bhandari for life.
Angel Bhandari.
Yes, Angel Bhandari is, as I keep saying, the Rakhi Sawant we were promised.
Yes.
Right? You see throughout the show, she's quite the like supporting other women, apart from when they wrong her, and she's just like constantly telling the men off, and to me that was like, it was nice to watch. And of course, just kind of having it's just so alarmingly over the top that there's something very like, I know people like this, like we've all met these people, but just to kind of see them do whatever it is they were meant to do on Skulls and Roses was something I'd never seen before, and it also didn't seem to carry the weight of reality TV as we know it, the big bosses and the all of that, but it just kind of it makes you feel like you need to take a shower after watching it. After watching Skulls and Roses, I laughed, I cringed, but eventually I felt like, theek hai, like this is a section of people and they are being represented, maybe not to their liking, but it's funny, and they don't always come out looking bad. They do come out looking like characters who have actual aspirations, who have actual, who have a sexuality, who have with Angel Bhandari's completely open sexual conversation, which was very alarming to even people on the show. I felt like that was very empowering for a lot of people, I'm sure.
And there was BDSM. There was BDSM representation on the show.
Yeah, there was. I think Skulls and Roses really broke new ground in sort of non-talent based reality shows. A generation that's grown up on Roadies and Splitsvilla and
because it kind of also and it always combined the most loved aspects of all of these, right?
Yeah.
There was Roadies plus Splitsvilla plus Fear Factor. I mean,
it was on the web, so they could give
galis. On the internet. Yeah, so they could not just give galis, they could set up tasks that genuinely felt challenging, not just from a physical aspect, but from an emotional, psychological aspect. It felt a lot more complete than I think the first 5 or 6 seasons of Roadies felt that complete. And I mean,
I'm hoping there's a season 2 and 3 and 4 and 5.
Oh, definitely.
I hope so.
The show's done really well.
Your favorite line from Skulls and Roses? You know mine. Pottiness.
My favorite line actually is from your favorite show, which is Dilly Darlings, the dandruff line, which I will let you do.
Opinions are like dandruff. Jhado aur aage badho. Or I'm too glam to give a damn, darling.
That's my second favorite.
Which brings me to the other brilliant show of this year. I actually downloaded Z5 and still have it because this show is a revelation. Just full disclosure, I'm from Pitampura originally, so obviously this show calls to me
close to home.
Yes, it's a sort of like a throwback to where I spent the first 20 years of my life. But other than that, I can assure it's taken me so much effort to guarantee to people and then show them like aunts and cousins ke Facebook profiles to prove to them that these people exist IRL. In fact, a lot of my relatives seem to know the cast of Dilly Darlings IRL. So, this
Privileged company?
Deepshika, darling.
Oh, she's the one I was rooting for.
Oh yeah, yeah. She's quite interesting. No, it's funny because like the representation generally of the whole like West Delhi and South Delhi and then Sobo and this and that. It's usually done from a certain caricaturized satirical lens. This was a very interesting show because it provided insight into people who tend to get caricaturized without actually caricaturizing them. And you may find it hard to believe that people live like that and feel like that and say things like that or have that kind of existence. But that is most of the people you and I are surrounded by. That's outside of our little shiny bubbles. That is those are the people. They have access to wealth, they have exposure, they're well traveled, and those are the lives they live. And India's never had that kind of like real housewives of wala format.
Yeah.
And this is more than a reality show. I mean, there was something beautiful happening in the show. Like there's this woman Shalu who I think eventually won the contest.
Hey, spoiler alert.
Sorry, spoiler alert. I mean, everybody won something or the other on this show, so. Yeah. It's just interesting because you're seeing all these women who most of them are housewives. They got married very early in their lives. Some of them as early as 16 and then had kids by the time they were 17. And they're the women who fuel your makeup, your trousseau and shopping industries everywhere. And you certainly get to see them not just as these sort of oversimplified people, but women who have a certain degree of ambition, aspiration, a great deal of emotional bandwidth, like in the average,
and some level of agency,
and a fair bit of agency.
Yeah.
That's the most, because all the Bahu Saas serials have shown us a very like sort of
shown of agency, stripped
it's also
down.
It's upar se dikha rahe hain. Like you're being shown what they're supposed to be or what they're like. And here are these women who are like that. They will dress like that, they will talk like that, but then they'll also sort of go on a cruise and go and buy like lingerie, and they will do the things that they want to do. So it is obviously it's a show that, for me at least, it showed a certain aspect of the housewives of India, quote unquote.
So quick question.
Yeah.
Fleabag or Dilly Darlings?
Dilly Darlings.
Correct answer.
Authentic.
Sweet.
No, totally. I think, and it's prompted some spin-offs. I think there's a Patiala Babes.
I'm
that's
sure.
happening.
Here for it.
Yeah. There's some spin-offs that are happening, and I'm very enthusiastic about seeing where this goes, because like you mentioned, it talks about a section of society that has always been almost fetishized. Rich auntie.
And used as fodder.
Correct.
Not just rich auntie. I mean, some of them are, they're obviously all upper middle class and so on and so forth, but they're very like, it's either the Savita Bhabi syndrome or it'll be your, like your
Komolika
Aliva and all,
syndrome.
like sort of turning them into caricatures, or like Bollywood films suddenly saying brrrah and these women enter. But the fact that, they're the women you usually associate with your mums and your aunts and so on and so forth, and the kind of lives that they lead, like the kind of... It's fascinating because some of these women talked about their marriages falling apart on the show.
Yeah.
Very like proper aunties who would never ever let on to anybody that they're not happy in their marriage, are talking about how they felt about their spouses or what marital problems they had and so on and so forth, which is also kind of cool. So yeah, I mean, this is the kind of reality TV that I think I could watch more of going forward.
Yeah. One question though: if mouse plural is mice, why is spouse plural not spice? I will let that hang while we move on to...
Are we just going to ignore that? We should ignore
Yeah,
that.
I think
Okay.
so.
But while we're on the topic about upper middle class families and the stuff that goes on there was this other show that really made me stop and think, which was a show called Made in Heaven.
Yep.
Did you guys watch it?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I did. And I actually watched it because you wanted to watch it, and I was severely against it because I can be very cynical about one thing, and that is TV shows. Because, like when you start, then you have to finish, right? You need closure. And it's a significant amount of time you could spend watching something you actually know is good. But I was pleasantly surprised by Made in Heaven. Again, it's a very bubble, sort of like upper class, upper caste. Everything is rich and everybody has crores of rupees to get married. But in what it did, in the section of society it spoke to, I do think, because I in a way also sort of don't belong to that section of society, but I have a closer look into that section of society than I do most, even Dilly Darlings, for example. So to me it seemed like a good representation of that. It talked about a lot of things I hoped it would talk about, like having a major character that is gay, but that is not his entire character. He's not a caricature of a gay man who's like either overly effeminate as the how Bollywood can do.
Bollywood does that,
the whole using them as an accessory, which is deeply, not just problematic, it's unfair to the audiences also.
I think it was I haven't seen too many Hindi shows, but this was a good procedural show, that format of every
format was interesting.
the format, because you see it a lot in American and British television. You don't see this kind of format here,
and we don't have, I think people who watched what is that show, Saransh or Sanjeevani way back when on TV might disagree, but we don't do episodic procedurals anymore.
We don't. Yeah.
It's a format that's lost
this
on.
show did it quite well, I thought.
Yeah.
We're taking couples case to case while having an overarching sort of story and character development.
Yeah.
So
I mean, best sort of procedural adjacent content that we've seen for the longest time was CID. Right?
Yeah.
And CID was formulaic to a fault almost. And to see Made in Heaven come in and do something interesting. I know it's not the same genre, and one is a cop crime sort of a thing, the other is high society.
Yeah.
But I think they got the pacing, plotting on Made in Heaven.
And it
was
looked
pretty
nice,
spot
and
on.
that always helps.
Yeah, it looked damn good too.
Yeah.
it was for me like the Desi version of a Showtime show. You know what I mean? Like it was a glossy, nicely done show from people who clearly know this universe.
Yeah.
And that's why I thought Zoe Akhtar did this show very well, but maybe not a Gully Boy, where it felt like there was a disconnect between the world she was showing and what she's comfortable with. Here, I think it was just so...
She was in her zone.
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
was
This was the whole Dil Dhadakne Do milieu that she was trying to...
and it was done well.
It was.
4 more shots, please.
So I didn't watch that past the first episode, not because I didn't like it or wasn't interested in it, but simply because I just kind of wandered off onto other things. But I would love to hear what it's like.
I didn't watch it. I just went to Marine Drive and scream vagina at the top of my lungs.
That's it. That's what the show wants you to do.
That's what the show wants you to do.
Okay, lovely.
I celebrated my femness thanks to the show at Marine Drive.
I mean, that's impact, man. That's real world impact from content.
Absolutely. But I will say one thing. I don't know what the show is like. I've only heard very mixed reviews, of course. Lots of them very good. But some of them not so happy with the way things ended. But lots of those people were not very happy with Made in Heaven also. But I will say one thing. It's just... See, we are going to make problematic content. It's going to happen. I would just much rather have more female representation.
Than Kabir Singh.
And then let us kind of like discuss those things. Not just have the art, but have criticism of that art. Have conversations about that content or art or whatever you want to call it. Piece of entertainment. And then sort of go from there. Learn from there. Do better. Because I do feel like these web series are in a space to do better next season.
Yeah.
They will take these pointers because they know who their audience is. Whereas for Bollywood, the net is so wide that they don't need to listen to people like you and me screaming on Twitter because we're not their audience.
The other thing about web shows and their sort of learning turnaround or feedback turnaround, so to speak, is longer, is because they're binge, right? If you like, I remember when we were putting out Permanent Roommates season 2, and we got feedback about a character not being liked at all. Because it was a weekly release, we had the bandwidth to write the character out 2 episodes before. Whereas the moment you start putting stuff out, and I mean, you can see the contrast in TV as well. TV is weekly or daily, depending on what. Gives you a lot more leeway in terms of rearranging stuff or reshooting stuff. While binge doesn't let you do that. It's sort of here's a block of content, this is going to get shipped, and then we'll spend the next 18 months figuring out what we need to do next. But I totally agree with what Nama said, that I think as audiences, if we try to judge to the point of censorship, I think we're doing disservice to emerging filmmakers. Not everyone comes with a social agenda when they're trying to make something. I mean, there are certain people who do, absolutely. But there are always also people who create stuff that sort of balances itself on a broader social agenda, whereas the content itself is not about that, right? And I think that's my sort of evaluation of 4MSP. 4 more shots, please.
Wow.
Vagina!
Yeah, I mean, see, the thing is, we find that almost, I mean, I find it cringy. Sorry. I mean, and
No, man, I have 5 videos of me doing it in different variations.
No, absolutely. I mean, and I'm totally for it, right? I mean, let's everyone in this room stand up and say vagina. But if I judge it on the merit of stuff I've seen before and stuff that this is clearly referencing, I do a disservice to the content by itself.
That's a valid point. And like I said, like Nama said, it's
like I've seen when Harry Met Sally and the whole orgasm scene in a restaurant, right? Now you try and do that again. Someone did try and do that again.
That was Skulls and Roses, and I think that it was a very powerful performance
Skulls
from
and
Angel.
Roses was done very differently, right? It wasn't a performance that was put on there. You put people on the spot, 2 unknown people who've never been with each other, try to put them on. That was That was a different
And there's
texture.
plenty of shit shows out there with a bunch of boys doing stupid shit, and we just sort of
Shadi
let it
boys
go.
and all that.
all of
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think, this
Shadi
is-
Boys, there's this Z5 show called Boygiri. Oh my
No,
God.
let's
God,
not
that's
even.
just an
I feel like
unending-
that's not worth the
I'm sure
discussion.
Z5 is doing a great job.
With Lily Darlings.
With Lily Darlings, with Apharan, with a bunch of other things. I mean, I'd even go out and say Romil and Jugal, which is part of their first slate of stuff. Is very, very interesting work. But then they have their own sort of
Yeah.
flip side.
Sacred Games.
Speaking of disappointments.
So disappointing.
So
Were you though? Were you disappointed, or were you just like, I'm disappointed but not surprised?
This is again disappointed but not surprised. But it was the ending. Like the last episode was. It's like nobody gave a. Like nobody made the slightest of effort.
So it was a Game of Thrones, but in 2 seasons. So they managed in 2
and
seasons.
even less
but-
competent.
Huh.
well,
And-
it was terrible.
It was
I mean,
From start to
absolutely
end.
Like-
From
No, I mean
Namaah and I-
season 1 showed promise, right? Like everybody, I mean,
Season
at least the
one
way it
was
started,
kick-ass.
it started sort of tapering off for me towards the last few episodes.
Sure.
And I think that's what should have been our clue, that this was going to not end well.
It was my clue, right? Even season 1, I think, is massively overrated. There are good moments. There are great characters, I would say. There's some, and that's because season 1, I think, was a lot more true to the source.
Yeah.
Whereas season 2, they just said, "F it, we're just going to make it up as
And
we go
drift
along."
off, yeah.
Look, also
Yep.
there's
And
only
again, they gave season 2 also had some very powerful moments, right? It's not like it didn't. You had the guy getting lynched and stoned at the beach. That scene was really moving, and I think it's a very courageous depiction of mob violence. There was the entire co-opting of a criminal mastermind into a larger political agenda by way of multiple sort of levels of seduction, right? Right from psychological to the sexual. So they had the cornerstones for something bigger than what they were making. But I think a lot of the inexperience in the writing especially comes through. I know the guy who primarily wrote second season is an ex-AIB draft guy, which is, I mean, it's great as an opportunity, as a platform that, oh, hey, there are these people who are being sought after and brought through into the industry. But that guy is 2 years old in the industry. And when you saddle that person with the responsibility of what is arguably India's biggest show, you're bound to find points at which they
it
fail
sank. That
abysmally.
show in season 2 just sank. It just.
I mean, I think for me, it was encapsulated by Ranveer Shori with all of his recent glory on social media and what he's been doing to himself. I mean, no one said anything to him. He's pretty much created a space for himself. I think that started with him playing the terrorist in Sacred Game.
No, I think
in the
it
second
actually
season.
started with his divorce with Konkona, but sure.
Oh, wow, that's. I mean, I wouldn't speak to that because I still think that Konkona came off. I mean, good for her. So
I
yeah.
think Ranveer Shori needs to get deplatformed like nobody's business.
Oh no, all of them do, and that's the
No,
only.
not
way.
all of them. I mean,
Payal Rotki, him.
Payal Rotki to deplatform
ठीक
ही
है,
है ना.
हाँ.
नहीं, and when I say-
किसको फर्क
No,
पड़ता है?
Ranveer Shori definitely needs to, because he's been raging.
When I say all of them, I don't mean people I disagree with. I just mean people who are using hate speech in the guise of freedom of speech. Hate speech, I think, is where we can all draw the line and say this is not censorship. This is in the larger, like,
It is
if you're
actual hate
if you're
speech.
actually talking about lynching a certain group of people, or if you're talking about physically harming a group of people, that is against community guidelines. So you need to be sent off.
So
We'll bring this back. Yeah, I know we
Yeah,
love to hate
we-
on Ranveer Shori, but we'll bring this back to Sacred Game. So, massive disappointment. Namaah and I watch a lot of content. We really do. And almost never do I come off watching a show feeling like I wasted my time, right? Like, I saw Skulls and Roses twice voluntarily because it was entertaining as and then there was Sacred Games, which was just episode 4 onwards. It was I think it was 2.5 hours, 3 hours of what the hell is going on? Just that.
and then
Right.
there was that strange passcode situation.
Oh yeah, what was that?
Oh God.
I mean,
I
if they were going for...
I was feeling really embarrassed for the show at that point. I was feeling really embarrassed. It's like when film school grads send in their internship applications and they show you the diploma films, like the really short, low budget ones, and they clearly they thought they were being really slick and stuff. Sacred Games second half of season 2 literally felt like that. Except you feel like oh, somebody's making an effort, but also like don't.
And what a waste of Pankaj Tripathi. I mean, that
was I think that was the biggest travesty, because
how do you mess that up? He is like a Joaquin Phoenix. If he's on screen, you're looking at him, you're watching him do things, you're just kind of there with him. And if he's not compelling to me as a character, then there's been a serious boo-boo on the writing side of things.
So yeah, it was quite a disappointment.
Speaking of stuff that was not disappointing, was this show called Kota Factory. I don't know if you guys saw, but it was one of those very interesting takes on a culture that is around probably only in India, which is the whole IIT coaching culture at Kota. And we've seen stuff that outright glorifies slogging for IIT entrance, right? I know Three Idiots had that whole bit about that kid was this really brilliant kid who made the drone in his hostel room commit suicide and all of that. And that was sort of highlighting in a very tangential way the pressures of being at IIT. But Kota Factory, what it did, I'm sure neither of you have seen it. What it did was humanize the Kota IIT aspirant. And not in the... oh no, I am in the wrong stream of life and I need to do something else and engineering to mujhe nahi karna hai. The general Rona that you have of people who think engineering so bad. But it was more like, how do you rebel against yourself to continue to chase what it is that you want and then discover the pitfalls of that chase? Right. So, while I would have loved it if Kota Factory delved a little more into the negative aspects, the pressures, etc., they did do that in a very approachable, very humorous way. And what really stands out is there's a scene where the protagonist and his sort of roommate / comic relief buddy, they're trying to figure out. They got an assignment from someone. They're trying to figure out how to do it, etc., etc., and they go out and meet every topper of every batch, right, in that coaching center. And every topper of every batch points them to this one specific guy, and they go to that one specific guy, and who's sort of supposed to be, the be all and end all of IIT coaching learning, and that guy turns out to be a fraud. And that guy's like, bro, mereko nahi pata hai. I'm lying to my parents that I'm doing this. But I have to do this because that's the expectation from me. So it covers a very important and, again, very caricaturized element of the education system in a very, very sort of down-to-earth, well-written. I'm a massive fan of Saurabh Khanna's writing in general. And they chose to release it in black and white. That's a power move. Which is a total power move. And it was just about my last days at TVF when this decision was taken. And 55-minute episodes done in black and white. It's like 55-60 million views. So, massive show. I think fans rated it the number 1 Indian web series on IMDb. And TVF has done... TVF has left no stone unturned to make sure, TVF and IMDb for that matter, have left no stone unturned to make sure that news goes out, deservedly so. But yeah, Kota Factory was something that I thoroughly enjoyed. On the other hand though, there's this other show that was again based in college. There's a show called College Romance, which is it's a timeliner show, very Delhi college scene. It's for 5 episodes, the story of 6 friends, 3 guys, 3 girls, some couples within the group, some couples outside, whatever. Very standard modern college story. 100 million views. 5 episodes.
It really pays off to have the population we do.
It really does.
I know,
It really does.
We get to 1 million views like that.
Yeah.
It's nice. No, but I'm sure these are... And you know what? I think one of the things... since we are talking about web series, I will take this opportunity to talk about the revelation of the past maybe decade for me, which started on the web and then became a TV show that HBO picked up, which is High Maintenance.
Right.
Right, and I'm sure that Kota Factory and High Maintenance have very little in common in terms of their source, their material or the contents of the show. But I think one thing that it does talk about is it takes one niche. And it is true to that niche, right? It lets people from that niche sort of shine as not just the stoner friend or the IIT friend, but within that subculture, it talks about all the nuances. So to anyone who's listening right now and who hasn't watched High Maintenance, it's on Hotstar, all 3 seasons. It started out as a Vimeo web series, which got picked up by HBO. The first season is it kind of builds up, but the second and third season are whether or not you are somebody who has experimented with marijuana in your life. It is really a story of people. It is very Brooklyn based, but it is as global as it gets in its insights about people and how people, how people interact with each other. I think there are shows, there's one aspect of it that I really enjoy, which is people talking over each other, right? Which only one other show kind of did really well, which is another animated show called The Life and Times of Tim. Extremely underrated show. I'm sorry, I have made so many recommendations already, but this is who I am. And, so I enjoy dialogue writing that doesn't seem like Aaron Sorkin-esque monologues. I do like a lot of Aaron Sorkin's work. It has its place. But for my mainstay, I do like people kind of having conversations where they stutter and they say things they shouldn't say. And then they forget, there is loose threads. That feels a lot more authentic. It feels like I'm sitting in the living room with them. And so yes, High Maintenance is a web series win for me. That is the magic of the web, where you can talk about maybe niche concepts in a truly in depth, in a way that feels not only authentic to the people who've created it and the people watching it, but also to the subculture it represents.
Fantastic. I think you hit it on the head when you said it's about the storytelling has to be more about the people. I think we are entering a phase of storytelling where dialogue becomes a lot more important than the premise or than the execution. One of the things that brought back when you said dialogue that brought back was how Kota Factory again deals with really simple stuff, right? There's this whole sequence about the protagonist going to his mentor, which is Jeetu Bhaiya, played by Jeetu. And this guy's joined the batch late, he's behind, all of that, and Jeetu's like, dude, karna to padega. And it takes him an episode to realize karna to padega ka matlab kya hota hai. What does it mean? Right? What does doing hard work mean? Right? It's such a simple exposition, right? But you only ever see it covered in stuff like the Rocky montage, right? Yo, turn, whatever. But to see it done through dialogue, it was a really enriching experience. I think it was something that stood out, right? Quickly pivoting to the last 2 genres that I want to cover, comedy and documentary, right? How was the year in comedy for you guys?
So Koval and I decided earlier today that comedy is cancelled.
In general?
Yes. So it's not just because of the general landscape, and comedy in of itself, nobody has an issue with. I would, in my time, I have thought of myself as a person deeply entrenched in humor as a pastime or as a personality trait. But comedy as a device within a storytelling setup, great. Comedy as the format, it's like rap. Before Gully Boy happened and every brand wanted a rap jingle to a nauseating point. I mean, yeah, more power to the creators, but then they're not actually hiring those boys. They're hiring their only copywriters to write in Kurla Hindi, whatever that even means, right? That's not a thing. Like Gully Boy is not like the whole concept of, you know what I'm talking about. Like it's done to death. It's been talked about by a lot of people. I think Bhanoj also talked about that in the previous, in a few episodes earlier. But, what comedy became with stand-up, specifically with the AIBs and the EICs and the other 3-letter acronyms of the world, is that it just became the format. Like jokes per second. And that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But then you have, in stark contrast, you have TVF's content in their web series, whatever they've done, that I've watched, where it's funny, it's local, it's very like there's a lot of like brohood, there's a lot of like, banter going on. But the comedy happens to be a device in a larger story that you're telling, rather than becoming the story. Because I'm yet to watch a comedy. I think Karunesh Talwar is fantastic. I am going to say that. I have big love for not only his work, but for him as a person. But with the exception of him, I have tried to watch and Sumukhi, of course, because not only because, she brings a very strong female voice to an otherwise, it's a boys' club, everyone knows that. But also because I find women who are loud and angry and just in general don't hold back their anger very empowering now, because there is a certain validation of anger that you're right to be angry. So long you've been told that anger is not a good thing, it's not a good color on you. But now it's just, abhi to we're all angry. We're all angry for different reasons. It's just nice to have that packaged well in a person that you trust to bring you content that is real and is, not to like keep using the word, but authentic, right? So with the exception of Sumukhi and Karunesh, I'm okay if nobody ever does a stand-up special again in this country.
Wow, that's brutal.
I think
no Kapil Sharma for you.
I'd forgotten he existed, and there he is again.
He makes 1 crore an episode.
More power to him.
I'm kind of done with comedy, internationally, Indian, whatever. Like, I think I need a break from comedy.
Yeah.
Per se. Like, even people like Hassan Minhaj have started to disappoint you on political fronts and so on. Mm-hmm. It's like, for me, comedy was always like a tool for social and political commentary, and that's where that's why it's failed the most there. Whether it comes to gender, whether it comes to actual fascism, it's just been deeply disappointing. And I think then it just becomes branded content and not actual comedy. Comedy was always supposed to be subversion. It was always supposed to be about dismantling and destroying status quo, and it's been exactly the opposite. And as somebody who ends up working often on the side that commissions with the brand or works for the brand, the last few years I realized comedy was becoming just another sort of thing that you kind of rode the wave off because it made for like that extra few 100,000 views without paid push, and didn't actually have any intrinsic value to the people who were either watching it or commissioning it.
Absolutely.
And I think I've also seen and I had to still engage with it because it was a part of my job, but even that's changed now. None of my clients for the most actually want comedy anymore. And it's unfortunate because I think that right now, the way things are in India, it would have been very nice to have like strong satire, strong voices, a great deal of very accessible desi humor to counter the sheer amount of shit going on WhatsApp, because no amount of us protesting, putting out smart comments on Instagram or Facebook is ever going to change the fact that most people actually need things to be
bite-sized.
And bite-sized, entertaining, and so on and so forth, and we just don't have that. And
snackable content.
Sure. Yeah. And I think just comedy as a general kind of quote-unquote scene in India could have done that, but it's just been a giant sort of conglomerate disappointment.
But then to move out of the country, just to like talk about 2 big comedy wins to what we were talking about earlier, is Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, because the stand-up is actually funny. And it's new to write stand-up that is relevant to a time that we don't exist in. I can't imagine that's easy to do, but her stand-up delivers. It's a funny show, it's a good show, it's a sweet show, and it looks gorgeous, so that always helps. It has just amazing production design. As far as I'm concerned, the costume design alone makes me want to watch it. So there's that. But then there's Nanette, right? Which again is from a while ago now. It's not so recent anymore. But that's the day comedy changed for me. Because that's the day I saw proof of comedy be used for something larger. I watched it 3 times. I cried 3 times. Now you bring up Nanette. We have a conversation for more than 3 minutes. I will cry again, and I will be happy. Those will be happy tears, because that has happened. I am happy to exist in a world where Nanette was as well received as it was, because it does speak to a certain sophistication of the audience. Not by way of, the classes and the masses, of course. I don't mean to be elitist, but to whoever is watching Nanette and to whomever it is accessible, there is a point of connect that is deeply human. The insight aspect of Nanette that sort of really differentiates it from other comedy specials while also being a comedy special.
Right.
Meanwhile, we have Kapil Sharma.
We have Kapil Sharma indeed. And
should we
and he's going to be around.
End on TikTok? Because I think
I was just coming to that actually. To the section where, and I know we're like an hour 30 plus into this.
But just such interesting people.
If you say so.
Wow.
But no, here's where I want to sort of take this before we end is you talked about how brands don't want comedy anymore.
Less so. I mean,
less so, sure.
Hardly ever anymore.
Sure. What are some other shifts that 2019 saw, right? I think anthems have gone out in a big way.
Anthems have gone out.
Anthems are
But
just,
manifestos have come back.
Sure, manifestos have come back, but anthems are out.
Yeah.
It's out,
Comedy
comedy's
sketches are out.
Yeah.
For sure, comedy sketches are out.
I mean, I see the whole influencer trend also. Everybody's struggling right now as to what constitutes an influencer, who to go to, paid. It's there, but I see like that sudden sort of desperate sheen that was attached to influencers. Also, kind of everybody's reevaluating what it means, what is a micro influencer, what's a A-lister, and so on and so forth. And I think the biggest shift has been that people are trying to do purpose-based messaging, for sure. The other thing is, I mean, and I know it's been building up for a while, the idea of localized content and regional content, but I think TikTok sort of brought it about in a very big way. And to the point that now I don't remember the last time I was at a briefing meeting with a brand or an organization or a think tank, because like I mentioned, we've been doing a lot of social impact. They all want TikTok. Where if it's a UN based organization or a global think tank or like some sort of foundation, they want to use TikTok because of EduTalk. They want to use TikTok as an educational edtech sort of tool. If it's a brand, they want it because that's where all the mass audiences are at. So irrespective, everybody wants a little bit of that. And the biggest change has been suddenly that very glossy, very urban, very hashtag millennial, edgy Instagram vibe has been replaced by TikTok's very, very democratic voice of the masses. And hey, let's acknowledge that's where the numbers really are at vibe.
I think the TikTok's the biggest development since Facebook itself, I think.
Yep, I'd say so.
I mean, Instagram got that incremental shift towards more visual content, but TikTok is what sort of broke the barriers that the barriers to comprehension, the barriers to usage, that really broke down with TikTok. And I mean,
it's also broken my brain on many occasions.
Yeah, of course.
Because I'm still struggling to. It's suddenly you realize that all the understanding you have of how content functions and what what parameters are don't really apply to a format where if there are a billion people on it, it's a billion different kinds of identities and voices, and they're all kind of like on their own trip as opposed to following what is brand marketing dictated.
And that's really pushed forward by the fact that TikTok doesn't have the concept of friends.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't matter. You don't have to add a person as a friend. You don't have to do any of that shit. Even if you don't follow anybody, there is a For You page that throws up content.
You don't even have to sign up.
You don't even have to sign up, for sure.
Which really helps.
Yeah, but we talked about this on another episode as well. What's beautiful about TikTok is that for years we've had a sort of almost elitist way of looking at storytelling, and like ye kaun dekhega. And I think TikTok answers that question first and foremost. Right? It answers the question about ye kaun dekhega with pretty much exact pinpointing of ye kaun dekhega. And that's empowering. It's markedly different from how Facebook and Instagram pitch themselves, where they're all about targeting. So put your content out there and we'll target and push it out and whatever. But TikTok does it entirely differently. I think we're still seeing very early days. They are facing a lot of problems in terms of keeping underage kids out of it, in terms of keeping their community guidelines. And because it's a Chinese company, the community guidelines are also very sort of draconian. So they won't let any sort of quote-unquote negative content out there. I think a few Qyuki talents had their TikToks taken down.
Some of the most major talents, so as somebody who works very closely with a lot of TikTokers or TikTok creators, it's what you said, right? What TikTok really does for me individually is I am invigorated by the democratization of who gets to tell or who gets to dictate what format stories are being told in. It's simply just that there's a lot of, those reptiles of Kurla and all of those pages. I mean, they're funny if you watch them, but if you are going to dissect how you consume what you consume, that finding all of that humorous is steeped in elitism. It's steeped in privilege, and not the kind where it's just like blindly, following a trend. It's also a part of you knows that you're laughing at them because you think you're better than them, right? When like a lot of boomers will say things like influencers not a real job or whatever, but then when you closely look at what some of the, especially the big TikTokers are doing, they have more work ethic than most professionals I have worked with within. And this is not a commentary on the professionals I've worked with. It's just that these boys and girls work hard, right? They work hard at what they do. They have a clear vision of who their fans are, what they want, how to service these fans, how to stay humble, and how that humility then kind of becomes a part of their brand. Oftentimes, they're very, very young when they hit this kind of success. If they find the right kind of mentor who helps them develop that talent into being something bigger, into being a sustainable business model, great. Like where you become a lifestyle and fashion influencer, when then you can maybe have a line of merch, you can maybe have products, right? Which is something that we've also at Qyuki just done. We've just launched a deodorant with Mr. Faizu, which has done massively well. And of course, a lot of blood, sweat and tears went into it. But essentially what does the heavy lifting is this lovely boy called Mr. Faizu, who is a professional TikTok creator. He is not a boy who one day stumbled into fame. He has, of course, he's had a great team working with him. But it's amazing to see what they're doing, and it's amazing to see where they come from and how their lives have changed, and why they are as aspirational as they are to the 10-20 million boys or girls sitting in either tier 2 or tier 3 cities, because they think that if Faizu can do it, then they can do it. Faizu is not a product of nepotism. Faizu comes from a very humble background. He comes from a place like most of his fans, and he has made it to a point where he's now traveling the world, doing cool things, doing music videos because he's Mr. Faizu, and still a lovely, lovely person. Still not somebody.
The last time something like this happened, I feel, was YouTube. I think, but what YouTube did for the rest of the world, in India, YouTube was still, barring some exceptions, still limited to the cities and the slightly...
It was a function of the access. Right?
And TikTok is doing for India now what YouTube did in the rest of the world. I think that's the huge difference.
I wouldn't take anything away from YouTube. They've done a lot of
They still
good
have
work
their sort of captive audience. But TikTok is, because of the way it is, because of the access changing in India.
Yeah.
I think it's doing that.
See, it's also really playing the UX of TikTok to like go back to like just that foundation level stuff. It just plays into the attention economy.
Yeah.
YouTube pe you have to go, you have to search for what you want, or you have to search for a vague term of what you want. You might get a few suggestions. Whatever's up there on the first page, you will watch that, because nobody goes to the second page of YouTube suggestions unless they're looking for something specific and haven't found it, right? But with TikTok, you don't know what you're going to get next, and there is a certain brilliance to that. There is a certain joy of discovery to that, and it won't last long enough that so even if you don't like it, it's going to end very soon. So there'll be something new. You might like that.
And the sense of community because of challenges.
Yeah.
Because everybody is then sort of playing off each other, and just the way the format of challenges works.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, of course, it has dictated aesthetic, not to even go there. It has dictated aesthetic to the 90%, not to the 10% as Instagram has. Instagram can, obviously, where I teach, I've all... the past 3 terms, I cried myself hoarse talking about Instagram and what Instagram has done for UX, what's done for the millennial aesthetic and all of that. And this term, I find myself talking 90% about TikTok, because anybody who knows what's happening knows that TikTok is the next Instagram and bigger, because it is opening up avenues that Instagram couldn't even dream of. In the sense that it's not going to be beautifully curated visual content. It's going to be content that just slaps you in the face of the entertainment, and then you make of it what you will. Whether that's brands who want to get on board, or it's individual people like you and I are not making TikToks right now, but nothing stops us. I have TikTok on my phone, and I have an ID. Nothing stops me from like trying it out, right? So today, when the 10% have also realized that this is my privilege that's keeping me from this, and get on the platform, and then it's finally democratic for everyone with a smartphone, of course, and internet access, which these days is not easy to come by, as we've learned. But then I think it'll become more and more interesting because brands are already getting on board. With Instagram also, brands took a really long time. With YouTube, well, brands took a fairly long time. But now with newer platforms, brands are getting more and more savvy.
TikTok and brands have already met.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's happening.
And Pepsi did a campaign that was 3 billion views. We did a campaign for...
Movie releases.
Massive.
Movie releases are
massive.
huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what I'm hearing is TikTok has come of age in India. The creators are all on TikTok as well, are looking at creating sort of ancillary lines of business. I think the biggest success story for TikTok, the biggest advertisement for TikTok last year was Old Town Road.
Yeah,
a song that just started as a TikTok song, making it to every single chart, making it to every DJ remix, whatever else have you. So big expectations from TikTok in 2020. Do you think there'll be a TikTok based movie?
I hope so. I hope so, because with every format you need to test the format to its fullest. So if we are going to make a TikTok web series, do it, right? Like IGTV, for example. For a very long time, people were very skeptical of what was happening. But now IGTV will have, or does it already have, web series? Right? That are Instagram-based web series.
Yeah, it does.
And for a long time, that seemed like a ludicrous idea, because even when you think about series, it does seem long format to you. Right? It seems like at least 10-15 minutes ka hoga. And 10-15 minutes is not the length for which we're used to watching video on our phone as much as we'd like. Unless we're watching a YouTube video or you're watching Netflix or something like that, where we have settled down in bed and we're saying, okay, now we're going to watch this.
No, the trouble really is vertical video, right? The moment you try and create high value content on vertical video, you severely limit the surfaces it can go on.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think that's also changing though. I think more and more, like for instance, when my production team gets involved, more and more we're being asked to shoot vertical. And then also design for vertical, right, from set design also. So the thing is, landscape was also it's a thing. You develop that whole language and grammar and production, design, editing, everything was developed around it. Now that most consumption is happening on vertical, I think we're also seeing like people shift that kind of entire visual grammar to it, and I think it's a matter of time where it will kind of either become like a equal kind of alternative or it'll become the norm. I hope not, but at least for digital, it looks like that.
Yeah, for art directors, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things that stand in the way there, right? I don't think it'll ever become an equal partner.
I don't think so either, and I hope not.
Yeah. While technically you'll adapt the skills to the new visual format, what will take a long time breaking down is, where does content make money? Content makes money depending on the number of platforms it goes to, right? Either you'll make a licensing fee or you'll make advertising money. Couple of years ago, vertical was the shiny new thing, and we were all expecting that, hey, everybody who's anybody will shift to vertical, right? And they did. Instagram did IGTV, YouTube went vertical as well, Facebook went clearly vertical. The challenge is this. People don't just watch content on a Facebook or an Instagram, right? They watch content wherever the hell. So if I get a WhatsApp video, I watch it on WhatsApp. Largely people still watch TV, right? Or largely people who are digitally connected are watching OTT stuff. And all of it is in landscape, right? So till the time there is a general widespread adoption across surfaces and devices for vertical, I think it's going to be very, very limited, right? That is all beyond the fact that the producer, the art director, the director, talent, edit will adapt, technically speaking. But till the time that the money really flows in vertical, I don't see it coming close. I think it's lost a fair bit of steam in terms of how it was growing the last couple of years. Be that as it may, as we near the 2-hour mark in this conversation, I think this is the longest episode we've done, Darius. This is the longest episode we've done. Fittingly for a retrospective then. We talked about the big shifts for brands. We also talked about the big shifts for creators, especially TikTok. What are the big takeaways for you as creators, as storytellers and story sellers?
So for me, I think I'm going to go back to what I've been badgering on about, which is the idea of authenticity in content, right? Because you have an audience that is more and more discerning. every day. And I feel like now is the time for brands to put their money where their mouth is, and their mouth where their money is, because a lot of people are trying to do CSR stuff. Koval touched upon that earlier. A lot of brands want to get involved with the gender conversation, with the mental health conversation. This is the new trend. This is, this, that, the other. And everybody, I think that there is good intention somewhere. But I feel like now is the time to make this content also educational. And I feel like that is happening. Like, if you see the way that Instagram and Twitter are being used by most people of most micro influencers, I'm going to say big influencers, but, because they have brand deals and stuff to worry about. But most people with a steady followership, the way it's being used over the past couple of weeks really speaks to how people can use content as a platform to then not only educate but also mobilize masses towards more political action. And I don't mean political only in the sense of policy and in the sense of vote for this person or do this or do that, but also the opinions they have and how those opinions affect policy. And obviously a lot can be said about the current climate, but I think one of the key takeaways is that this is a watershed moment for the Indian masses, politically speaking. We have not engaged with policy for a long, long time. At least the youth has not, the middle class youth has not engaged with policy for a long, long time. So I feel like in 2020, because we start the year on this note where protests are happening across the country, I think that I don't think I've seen a single brand come on board. And I know what the barriers are. I mean, at least in my little capacity of having worked with brands, I know that there are barriers, but I promise you that there will be champions. Even if it may be a niche, there will be champions of these brands. These brands will make fans for life. So even if they're not going to do it out of the goodness of their heart, I hope that they do it because this is a niche audience for the taking, and this is an audience with spending power. So that is going to be my takeaway from where we've started this year, that brands talk about the stuff that is affecting people on a daily basis, about who gets to be a citizen and who doesn't get to be a citizen of this country, because that seems fairly basic for you to get involved in.
I think we're a long way from where brands will actually do that, unfortunately, especially in India. I think I'm definitely sort of personally, and as the leader of a team which also to a great extent agrees with me, this very strange / interesting thing happened a couple of weeks ago. So the protests were happening. I obviously wanted to create content and so on and so forth. And after we put out one of the videos that we did, one of my team members got bullied and harassed and then threatened. And the team was feeling very sort of shaky about, is it okay to put out? Now, the content we were putting up thereafter was going to be very sort of satirical, but also about an overall sort of social consciousness, and very, like, it was kind of like a half sketch, half kind of take commentary on what it means to be Indian. It's fairly harmless, but also kind of touching upon what and we wanted to again put it up on so the way it was shot and the way it was written was more for the WhatsApp audience. We just wanted to put it out there. And my team was terrified. And they said, are you sure we should be doing it at this point? And then I had to sort of draft a long letter to them about why I think it's important for us, even though we work with brands and I have fiscal responsibilities to you guys and to my clients, but it's time we start taking a stand because the world is literally burning. And I think, so coming from that space, then we all had a conversation. I think going forward, we definitely do intend to be more honest to our political / daily socially conscious beliefs. And I'm hoping other people also join in, because if we don't, it's going to be very hard to explain later to ourselves and to other people around us as to why we didn't. And brands may choose to or choose not to jump on this bandwagon. I think creators definitely can and should. And I think we all, need to have that conversation about taking stands. And it's everything. You can't talk about mental health as a fluffy little thing, but then not also talk about the mental health toll being taken by socio-political climate factors on people, on gendered people, and so on and so forth. So I think maybe like the next 10 years could be a little more honest and less lip service.
I surely hope so, and of course, like, my optimism about all of this is delusional, and I'm fairly aware of that. But the thing is that in the current climate, that little sliver of hope is all you have to hold on to. So it is my hope that content creators and brands will come on board. Although, I know that it's a huge ask, and if not them, then I hope that the movement doesn't fizzle out, and then people find it within themselves to carry on what we've started.
And when Kartik Aaryan gets cancelled.
That would be a great silver lining to it all.
I think that was very well put. The need for more honesty from creators is very important, especially when you're trying to fight the powers that be. Because I wouldn't call them the enemy, because they're not the enemy. But their machinery is far stronger, right, in terms of putting content out there that lands the point that they're trying to make, whether it's true or false or whatever it is. And their machinery has the support of the big guns, right? I mean, you're ex-Jamia, Shah Rukh is ex-Jamia. You're speaking out, he isn't. The reasons behind which are for people to explore and understand, right? But if at the end of the next 10 years we have Shah Rukh come out and talk about stuff that's honest and important, I mean, I'm pretty sure the CAA debate will end when the Supreme Court strikes it down on the 22nd of January. But the issues don't end, right? And honesty and lending a celebrity voice to issues doesn't end. So I'm hoping that in 10 years we have Shah Rukh come out and talk about stuff that's important as well.
Or I was thinking this entire time, how does a brand get involved with this when they clearly know that there's a ruling party and there's so many? It's very simple. As a brand that has at any given point of time ever spoken about equality and peace and justice and just general goodwill, all you need to do at this point is put out interesting content about the idea of equality. You don't have to get political in terms of the politics of Indian local vote, electoral politics. You could, however, reaffirm sort of messaging about a lot of things and that go a long way into shaping general consciousness.
Absolutely.
And none of them have even done that. And that's a very sort of, like, you can do it. You can do it and get away with it. You can do it and like Nama pointed out, you could earn some big fans without it looking like you're taking advantage of it. You could do it in a way, because I mean that's what advertising does, right? It takes advantage of the moment and does it in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And yet you see nobody
allegedly
stepping up. Well, yeah, allegedly, often not. But
path of least resistance.
You see nobody even making an effort. But then you go on LinkedIn and right now, and then you see exactly why, and that's just unfortunate. But the good thing is that in the next 10 years, it's also going to be people like you, me and Namaah who are going to be heading these sort of spaces. I mean, in terms of the conversation, of course, it will be. And if it's not us,
that's a level of compromise which will be hard for me to achieve.
Well, I mean, I feel like
I'm kidding, obviously. Please, anybody who's listening, give me a promotion right away.
No, I mean, think about it. We will have we won't be 20 somethings anymore in the creative industry. And we aren't. Thanks for reminding me.
Hey, I'm still in my 20s, and I'm just gonna humble brag about that.
Do you have the papers to prove it?
I don't. Let's not get into that. It's a sore subject right now.
So yeah, I mean, what I mean is that people that have grown up sort of well, not from the previous generation, are going to be sort of older and shaping things hopefully more.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm hoping that we can reclaim the word politically correct. It was never meant to be a bad thing. I mean, like the whole idea of PC culture or a social justice warrior was never supposed to be a bad thing. It suddenly somehow has been. It's very important to be social justice warriors. It's very important to be politically correct. I mean, that's what keeps us from being bigots and assholes.
All of this, we're talking about all of this while Kevin Spacey is one by one killing the people who are going to testify against him.
That's just terrifying.
So, anyway.
That's just terrifying.
On that happy note, let us bring this episode to a close. There's this one question that we ask all our guests before we sign off, and that is for a recommendation for our listeners. Namaah?
So I will actually like to recommend something which is not a show in itself. It is a company of shows. It is a sort of collection of shows which are podcasts, audio-based fiction called Welcome to Night Vale. It's called Night Vale Presents. Sorry, Welcome to Night Vale is their flagship show, which is a podcast. And I think it was in recent memory, it was that one time, and you know what a big fan I am, but it is that one thing that changed the way I saw everything. It just changed how I saw entertainment, how I saw my own life, what I started expecting from literature, what I started expecting fiction to be. It's a coming together of such beautiful storytelling in this Terry Pratchett-y, sort of Discworld-y way, and it has like elements of dystopia, it has elements of every amazing thing that is about fiction, all of that. But what is great about Night Vale Presents, which is the larger production house that does a bunch of these shows, Welcome to Night Vale, Alice Isn't Dead, and a bunch of others, is that it is possibly the most it has been the most effectively, as I have seen, normalizing queer culture in fiction, wherein it hasn't been queer representation for the sake of queer representation, but it does representation so well where characters happen to be queer, happen to be gender fluid, happen to be gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual. Some of them are aliens, some of them are alien vampires. So, but it's amazing because it does all of this seamlessly, and it does it in a way that is compelling storytelling. Of course, it's hilarious and it's beautiful all at the same time. But it also does something that is amazing, which is teach people that audio content can be every bit, because podcasts are still growing here, right? Like, I'm saying that while we're on a podcast, but IVM has been the flag bearer of podcasts in this country, but of course America in that sense has had a little bit of a head start. But what Night Vale Presents has done has basically made me forget about all of the podcasts, and I spend 6 to 7 hours a day listening to podcasts, and that sounds so sad out loud, but I'm very happy about it because some of the best things I know I've learned from podcasts. And so yes, Night Vale Presents is my recommendation to everyone. If you must start with something, Welcome to Night Vale would be the podcast I would start with. They obviously have so many episodes now that it will seem like a mountainous task, but I hope that more people will listen to it.
All hail the glow cloud.
All hail the mighty glow cloud.
Koval?
Instead of giving one recommendation, I'm just going to list out some of the things, shout out to some of the things we missed talking about today.
Sure.
We didn't talk about Chernobyl. That was
we
this year.
didn't talk about Chernobyl. Good Lord, we didn't talk about
Chernobyl.
Okay, but can we do yes and no's to it? Like,
oh yeah,
sure,
Chernobyl.
Yeah, Chernobyl, no.
It was a quote unquote important show.
No,
it was
because
fine, it was a little boring.
And not just boring, no, because it's difficult to watch, no, because such Soviet demonization.
That.
And them talking just in English.
Yeah, British people doing Russian.
Yeah,
you're not even on the same side of history.
But still important, still
important. That's why
sure.
I mentioned it. Dark.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Basically, it's Stranger Things, but better.
Absolutely. But can I just, sorry to intervene here, but I think Dark really tests millennial culture, because I want to watch something that I'm moderately interested in, so that I can scroll in Instagram while I watch it. So when something has subtitles,
Dark doesn't.
I tend to drop off a lot easier. Sorry, continue.
So Dark, definitely. Derry Girls.
Fantastic.
Derry Girls was brilliant. Derry Girls would be my recommendation.
Dark, Derry Girls, both on Netflix.
Yes. The Politician, surprisingly not bad, especially because it's the same guy who plays Dear Evan, and Evan Hansen, and he's just brilliant to watch. And have we missed out on anything else?
I think Barry and The Morning Show.
The Morning Show.
Oh
my
yes.
God, I love that show. It is firstly Jennifer Aniston, right? I know we've all loved her for different reasons over the years, but my goodness, Jennifer Aniston.
And the most important show that came to an end last year, Silicon Valley. Great final season, capping off a show that captures a lot of what tech guys and startup guys go through, the euphoria, the deceit, the betrayal, all of that beautifully, and they wrapped it up in what I really thought was an epic final episode, right? They got the balance of fan service, doing the morally right thing for the protagonist, and delivering a very balanced ending. Right, I think Silicon Valley is super important. End of the decade show for us as well.
I think for me, the biggest recommendation of all is going to be Schitt's Creek.
Schitt's Creek, oh my god, yes.
Schitt's
You
Creek.
should do an entire episode on Schitt's Creek
Schitt's
because
Creek
it is
is
everything content can be when content
Beautiful.
is at its best.
It is beautiful. It is so beautiful. I can't wait for the next season.
I know I'm really sad because I know it's going to be the last season.
Yeah.
And while I'm all for all good things coming to an end, this one I will bawl for a week. So Vineet,
I
heads
will
up.
also
Are they
put out
running
a PSA for anybody who is a sucker big enough like me to be watching Supernatural still in the year of our Lord 2020.
man.
I am. Guys, they have done for fan fiction and meta-ness and Tumblr and women, young women on Tumblr that no other show ever has. So please. Yes,
I'll defer to that.
Supernatural
We will forget that you mentioned Supernatural and we'll end this episode at
I'm being
Schitt's
played
Creek.
out by
Yeah, it's like Olivia Colman at the Oscars.
Oh my god! But the Crown. The Crown had a good third season, I thought.
I'm still working up to it.
Or am I just do I just have Olivia Colman rose tinted glasses on because that's a possibility. She
Who
is
doesn't?
lovely.
Who
Yeah,
doesn't?
she
Who
is
doesn't,
lovely.
right? With that,
Supernatural.
fine, Supernatural. Watch
You know
it
what
if
you're
a
watching
sucker.
tonight, then, Vineet.
I am not watching Supernatural.
This is what it's.
With that, guys, thank you so much for your time. It's always fun to have a conversation, and I'm only legally obliged to say that to one person sitting at this table. But no, it was great, great having you guys. I think I wouldn't have wanted to do a retrospective of 2019 with two other people. So thank you for that. I think this episode really became a lesson in critically analyzing the stuff that we watch, right, and stuff that we like, and not just slagging it for being tone deaf, but also sort of understanding where it comes from. So yeah, thank you. That was like I said earlier, our longest episode of all time, and I think this will be our longest episode for some time to come as well. So thank you to our listeners for bearing through 2 hours of us talking about the entertainment we loved in 2019. Namaah Kumar, Koval Bhatia, thank you for your time. This is Vineet Kanabar saying good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta. I'm B50 on Twitter. I am the host of Paisa Vaisa, a show that talks money. On my show, I speak to experts from every field of money and finance, from stock markets, equities, debt funds, credit cards, life insurance, every possible area of money and finance that you can think of. We even did an episode on cryptocurrency. I've got fantastic guests from mutual funds to personal finance experts everywhere. Robo-advisory, startups, just name it, we've got it. At Paisa Vaisa, we help you make smart decisions about money. You work hard for money. Now make your money work hard for you. New episodes out every Monday, and you can listen to my show on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you have.
Shunyavan, 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 Shunyavan.
Hey, this is Shiladitya Mukhopadhyay,
And I'm Amit Doshi.
and we host Shunya One, the weekly podcast based on conversations about startups, entrepreneurship, across verticals like food tech or fintech, and digital payments, logistics, e-commerce, and of course, all the stuff from VCs and investors as well.
Over the course of our run, we've had some really great entrepreneurs. We've had Zishan Hayat from Topper, Naya Sagi from Baby Chakra, Ankush Sachdev from ShareChat, and Akrit from Haptic, among many, many more.
Yep, and we continue to get some of the biggest, smartest, and most innovative folks in the country in this space coming here, talking to us, all for you guys to listen to.
So tune in every Tuesday on the IVM app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts from, and get a chance to be a part of all of the tech banter and entrepreneurship conversations on our Slack channel. Talk to our guests, they show up as well. All you have to do is request an invite on ivmpodcast.com/Shunya1.